Chapter 632. The air in the living room was filled with the aroma of food. This made the environment feel more like a home. Li Qianxue wasn't in the mood to enjoy the atmosphere. Her expression was cold. If Su Qingsang were here, she would know that Li Qianxue had been like this for the past 20 years. She left the hotel early in the morning. After breakfast, she went to Su Qingsang's apartment. She sat in the car and watched Su Qingsang get sent to work by the driver. She watched Hu Jingyao leave too. After they left, she sat in the car for nearly 10 minutes before she got up. Li Qianxue had taken over the Li group recently. Although she was here to see her daughter, she was full of vigor. She was wearing a classic Chanel black dress with a white suit on top. The perfect combination of black and white made her slender figure look longer. Her long hair was tied up behind her head, and there was a delicate diamond necklace around her neck. Compared to Xiang Kaiping, who only wore an apron and had some flour on her hands, she was from two different worlds. Because of Su Peijian, the two of them had fought each other once. However, because of what Su Peijian had done, Li Qianxue didn't say much to Xiang Kaiping. This time it was different. She stared at Xiang Kaiping. Looking at her, she thought of the grievances she had suffered for more than 20 years, Su Qinghui and Su Qingsang. She could forget about Su Qinghui. She had divorced him and accepted it. But Su Qingsang couldn't. The atmosphere in the living room was still silent. She didn't move and neither did Xiang Kaiping. Li Qianxue looked around the room and finally walked to the dining table. There was a lot of flour on the table as well as stuffing and molds. Mooncakes. Li Qianxue turned to look at Xiang Kaiping, her eyes cold. Xiang Kaiping wiped her hands on the apron and didn't answer her. Good craftsmanship. Li Qianxue picked up a mold. It was a very small mold with cute animal shapes on it. Xiang Kaiping took a few steps forward and stood opposite Li Qianxue. You don't have good eyesight. Li Qianxue put down the mold and put her hands on the table. She leaned forward and stared at Xiang Kaiping's face. Xiang Kaiping, I want to ask you, where did you get the courage to stay here? Xiang Kaiping frowned slightly. She didn't like Li Qianxue before because of Su Qinghui, but now because of Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang was such a good daughter, but Li Qianxue had given birth to her. This made her feel very strange. Hu Jingyao invited me here. Qingsang asked me to stay. Li Qianxue sneered. You'll stay just because she asked you to? Where's your shame? Li Qianxue. Xiang Kaiping looked embarrassed. She didn't hear what Su Qinghui said to Su Qingsang when he came yesterday, but she could guess. Today Li Qianxue had come knocking on his door, and with such a rather rude attitude. Whether I stay or not doesn't seem to have anything to do with you, right? How could it have nothing to do with me? Li Qianxue raised her eyebrows. Her bright and beautiful face was full of arrogance. It's my daughter's home. It's the home of my daughter and son-in-law. Xiang Kaiping, what identity will you use to stay? Xiang Kaiping was a little unsure, but it was a fact that she liked Su Qingsang. It was true that she had given birth to Su Peijian, but it was also true that she had spent a few months with Su Qingsang. She lived alone in such a big villa. It was inevitable that she would be lonely. Su Peijian went to prison. Sometimes she would sit for a whole day without saying a word. No matter how good Aunt Zhao was, she was only there to help out. Most of the time she stayed in that house and thought about her life for so many years. It didn't matter to her to be alone in the past because she had never enjoyed the warmth of family by her side. But later she didn't want to be alone anymore. Su Qingsang wasn't her biological daughter, but she liked it here. Su Qingsang respected her enough and was close enough. Except for the way they addressed each other, they were almost like mother and daughter. Therefore, even though she knew that this situation was just a superficial piece brought about by Su Qingsang's pregnancy, she still couldn't help but cling to this feeling of home and was reluctant to leave. Now, Li Qianxue's appearance had uncovered the layer of peace that she thought was on the surface, making her understand that this place didn't belong to her. She was silent and there was a little embarrassment on her face. Xiang Kaiping hadn't taken care of herself all these years. Her hair had already turned gray, and the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes couldn't be hidden. She looked at least 10 years older than Li Qianxue. At this moment, showing such an expression made Li Qianxue feel like she was bullying her. This made her feel even more uncomfortable. The weak had always been pitted. Was Xiang Kaiping trying to say that she was bullying her? Say it. What identity are you using to stay here? Li Qianxue's voice became more and more impolite. Are you a nanny? Or a chef? Li Qianxue. Xiang Kaiping seemed to have finally found her voice. There was a hint of anger in her stiff voice. Don't go too far. Am I going too far? You stayed in my daughter's house and didn't leave. You wanted to steal my daughter. Who's going too far? I didn't. Xiang Kaiping couldn't defend herself. It was Qingsang. Wu Jinyao asked me to come. You came just because he asked you to? To put it bluntly, you still want to steal my daughter. I didn't. Qingsang is your daughter. I know very well. Of course you know. It's because you know that it makes it seem that you did it on purpose. She walked around the table and stood in front of Xiang Kaiping. She was a little taller than Xiang Kaiping. She looked down at Xiang Caiping's face. Because what you did was just to take revenge. Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue sneered and looked at Xiang Caiping's expression. You want to take revenge on me? You want to take revenge on me for stealing Su Qinghui. You also want to take revenge on Hu Jinyao for sending Su Peixian to prison. That's why you're here now? I didn't. Xiang Kaiping had never thought about taking revenge. No. Maybe she had at the beginning. When she first returned to Lin City, she really hated Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue. Even now she still hated them. However, she knew too well that she couldn't do anything. You didn't? Li Qianxue pointed at the ingredients on the table and said, Isn't this called revenge? You treat Qingsang well. You take care of her and make her grateful to you. Then she can't leave you. When that time comes, my daughter won't be close to me but to you. This is your revenge on me, isn't it? I didn't. Xiang Kaiping had been running her own business for more than 20 years and had some success in her career. However, she couldn't compare to Li Qianxue, who had been the heir of the family since she was a child. For a moment, her momentum was taken away by Li Qianxue. Her hesitation and pause were the best explanation. Li Qianxue took another step forward and said in a colder voice, You've already done this. Xiang Kaiping. You've lived here for a long time, haven't you? For such a long time, Qingsang didn't tell me about your existence. She didn't even mention you in front of me. She knew that what she did would make me unhappy, but she still let you stay. What? Because her heart has unknowingly been biased toward you. But what about you? All you're thinking about is revenge. Li Qianxue, you're talking nonsense. I didn't. You said you didn't, but your behavior, everything you did, was to take revenge on me. Xiang Kaiping staggered and took a few steps back. Are you feeling guilty? Because I'm right? Li Qianxue sneered and didn't hide the disdain on her face. Many years ago, you couldn't compete with me and hated me for stealing your man. So many years later, you found an excuse to get close to my daughter. You wanted to steal my daughter. Xiang Kaiping, you're really something. If someone stole her, it means that she wasn't mine. Xiang Kaiping finally calmed down a little. She looked at Li Qianxue and tried to suppress her anger. You said that yourself back then, and I'm telling you the same thing now. If you think that I stole Qingsang, it only proves that she isn't yours. You admit it? Li Qianxue smiled and said, Xiang Kaiping, do you think I'm Su Qinghui? Do you think I'll believe that you're innocent and harmless? She suddenly brought her face close to Xiang Caiping's. Her penetrating gaze made Xiang Kaiping feel as if she had nowhere to hide. You may indeed be pure and kind, and I also believe that you do have feelings for Qingsang, but, she stretched out a finger and gently pointed at Xiang Caiping's heart. It's also true that you want to take revenge on me. Her voice was very soft and she was very close to Xiang Kaiping. At such a close distance, Xiang Kaiping could see her expression clearly. Xiang Kaiping blinked and gently pushed the finger away. So what if it is? Taking a step back, Xiang Caiping's voice had regained its calmness. Can't I take revenge on you? You know what you've done. You stole Su Qinghui from me. It's been more than 20 years and you raised my daughter to be like that. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for Su Qinghui, how could Peixian become like that? What's more, Peixian only wants you to be her mother, so why can't I make Su Qingsang closer to me? Sometimes I really want and I really hope that Qingsang is my daughter. I don't think I did anything wrong. Just like you were when you were pregnant. You came to me and told me that you were pregnant with Su Qinghui's child. Do you still remember? You said that before you didn't care. But after you had a child, you and I relied on our own abilities. Li Qianxue, I'll say this back to you now. We rely on our own abilities. If you can make Su Qingsang kick me out and out of this family, then I admit defeat. If you can't, I'm really curious. What method will you use to make me leave your daughter? Li Qianxue wasn't in a hurry to accept Xiang Caiping's challenge. She chuckled, pulled out a chair and sat down. After so many years, Xiang Kaiping, why are you still so naive? Xiang Kaiping looked at her and frowned slightly. Li Qianxue's fingers gently tapped on the table. Then she supported her chin with one hand and looked at her sideways. Back then you couldn't win against me. What makes you think that you can win against me now? Wake up, Li Qianxue said bluntly. Qingsang is my daughter. If she had to choose between hurting you and hurting me, I can bet with you that she would definitely choose to hurt you. If I were you, I would leave on my own. After all, it wouldn't look good if someone really chased you away. I won't leave. Xiang Kaiping was unexpectedly stubborn this time. I told you I was invited by Hu Jinyao. Qing Sang tacitly allowed me to stay here. Why should I leave? Your courage is commendable. Li Qianxue nodded, stood up, and stood in front of Xiang Kaiping. Then I'll wait here. When Su Qing Sang comes back, we'll see if she chooses to keep you or me. After saying this, she didn't look at Xiang Kaiping. Instead, she walked to the sofa outside and sat down. Xiang Kaiping stood there, twisting her apron into a ball with her hands. It was wrinkled. She forced herself to calm down, stood back in front of the dining table, and continued to make mooncakes. She wrapped the prepared stuffing into the dough wrapper. Actually, it was really easy. It wasn't difficult. It didn't matter if she made it wrong. After all, no matter what she did, the final result would be eaten by Su Qing Sang. She really wasn't picky in this aspect, unlike Su Peixian, who didn't eat this or that. Her eyes were a little hot, but Xiang Kaiping just lowered her face and didn't even raise her head. In less than 2 minutes, 2 drops of hot tears appeared on the back of her hand. The temperature made her hand feel as if it was being burned. At this moment, she was even glad that Auntie Yu had gone home first. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't want others to see her like this. Another drop of tears fell, and she didn't even raise her hand to wipe it away. Li Qianxue was mostly right. She really liked Su Qing Sang, but she also really wanted to compete with Li Qianxue. It had been more than 20 years. She wouldn't forget how Su Qinghui abandoned her and married another woman. But she wouldn't forget it either. At that time, Li Qianxue, who was pregnant, ran to her and asked her to quit. She said that she was pregnant with Su Qinghui's child. She said that if Su Qinghui really didn't like her, why would he touch her? Xiang Caiping's appearance was average. When she was young, she was just a delicate and pretty girl. Her family background was also average. Her mother was a nurse and she also learned to be a nurse. However, before she could become like Nightingale, she was first taught a lesson by Li Qianxue. At that time, she touched her lower abdomen and wanted to counterattack Li Qianxue by saying that she was also pregnant. But she couldn't say it. Yes, she was also a proud person. Why would she fight with a woman for a man? Moreover, in addition to pride, she also had a faint sense of inferiority. Whether it was her birth or family background, whether it was her appearance or anything else, she admitted that she couldn't compare to Li Qianxue. Such emotions accumulated to the highest point after Li Qianxue came to her, and then she easily gave up on Su Qinghui. From this point of view, perhaps she didn't love Su Qinghui as much as she thought. After all, her pride was still above love. But then, when she was about to have a child, she really began to hate Su Qinghui. Why did she have to suffer like this? Why did she have to suffer like this? She was the one who grew up with Su Qinghui and even had an engagement with him. But Li Qianxue snatched him away. Her child had no status and her man wouldn't be responsible for her. After comparing the two, Xiang Kaiping made an impulsive decision that she would regret for the rest of her life. She threw the child to Su Qinghui. At that time she might have wanted revenge. After all, for a proud person like Li Qianxue, seeing her husband's illegitimate daughter swaying in front of her every day was enough to satisfy her hatred. However, Xiang Kaiping didn't expect that Su Qinghui would do something like changing the child. This directly led to the chaos in the next year. Li Qianxue was right. At first, she only wanted to recognize her daughter and enjoy a good time with her. But later, when she found out about the matter of changing the child, her emotions changed. Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue were both targets of her hatred. Without Li Qianxue, there wouldn't be Su Qinghui's betrayal. Without Su Qinghui, there wouldn't be 2 children's messed up lives. She really wanted to take care of Su Qing Sang and accompany her to give birth to the child. But deep down she really wanted to see Li Qianxue make a fool of herself. Aren't you powerful? Aren't you capable? Aren't you omnipotent? Aren't you going to steal my man? But now, your daughter is closer to me but she's estranged from you. If there's a problem, your son-in-law even asked me for help, but he didn't want to tell you. With such a comparison, the distance between them was obvious. She even thought that soon, when Su Qing Sang was about to give birth, Li Qianxue would definitely come to Rong City. At that time she could let her take a good look. She, Xiang Kaiping, could do things that she, Li Qianxue, couldn't do. However, she didn't expect Li Qianxue to come so soon. She couldn't even wait for Su Qing Sang's belly to get bigger and for her child to be born. Leave just like that? Xiang Kaiping was unwilling. She promised Su Qing Sang to make mooncakes for her to eat. She couldn't go back on her word. But what if she didn't leave? Li Qianxue was Su Qingsang's biological mother. Was there a need to ask who she would choose? At that time in Lin City, as soon as she recognized Li Qianxue, she ran to her and made things clear. The current situation wouldn't be too far off. Previously, her morning sickness was serious, so she needed her. But now that her morning sickness had subsided, she didn't need her anymore. Xiang Kaiping, if you don't leave now, when? Are you really waiting for Su Qingsang to chase you away? But how could she leave? She liked Su Qingsang and liked living with her. She also promised her a lot of things that she hadn't done. She really wasn't willing to leave just like that. Tears blurred her eyes. Xiang Caiping's heart was in a mess. She swept the materials that were stained with tears aside without thinking and then swept them into the trash can. She wiped away her tears and entered the kitchen. She should think about what to eat for lunch first. Li Qianxue, who was sitting on the sofa, wasn't as calm as she appeared. She couldn't sit still when she saw Xiang Kaiping continue to busy herself with the things at hand so calmly. She calculated the time very well. It was now morning. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao should be back in the afternoon. She had a few hours to stay here and watch Xiang Kaiping pack up and leave. But now, looking at Xiang Caiping's calmness, she couldn't help but worry about another thing. What if Xiang Kaiping didn't leave? Would Su Qingsang tell her to leave when she came back, or would she tell her to leave? Li Qianxue suddenly became uncertain. If Su Qingsang told Xiang Kaiping to leave, it would be fine. Her pride and dignity would be saved. But what if Su Qingsang couldn't bear to tell Xiang Kaiping to leave? What if she asked her to stay? At that time, the person who would be embarrassed would be her. Li Qianxue sat there motionlessly. She looked like an old monk in meditation, but her heart was far from calm. Especially when she saw Xiang Kaiping actually walking in the direction of the kitchen, her expression became even more unpleasant. What did this mean? Was she really going to pick a fight with her and not willing to leave? Li Qianxue stood up suddenly. She almost had the urge to go up and pull Xiang Kaiping away. But in the end, her reason and pride made her sit back down. She forced herself to take out her phone to deal with some work. She had to leave the company for a few days when she came to Lin City. She made a few calls and glanced in the direction of the kitchen from time to time, but she didn't see Xiang Kaiping come out. Her body moved and she almost stood up again, but she forced herself not to lower her head first. Whoever lowered her head first would be the first to admit defeat. Li Qianxue had always been a person who refused to admit defeat. That year, Su Qinghui was drunk and she was also drunk. The two of them didn't know how they ended up together. In fact, at that time she really liked Su Qinghui and really cared about him. She even felt that such an accident was not bad. At least she still had a memory. But she didn't expect that she didn't go home that day and that old Master Li would come. When her father saw the two of them rolling together, his first reaction was to ask Su Qinghui to take responsibility. In fact, at that time, Li Qianxue was unwilling. She knew that Su Qinghui had a woman he loved, and she also knew that they were childhood sweethearts and were about to get married. Having a relationship with the person she liked, she treated everything as a memorial, a ceremony. In fact, it was also very good. She persuaded old Master Li to let him stay out of this matter. She told her father that it was all her own choice. Old Master Li had always doted on her and had always granted her every request. Since she said to stay out of it, he wouldn't. She thought that if she relieved Su Qinghui of the pressure, he would thank her. But she didn't expect that at that time, Su Qinghui, who was embarrassed and angry, actually blamed everything on her. Su Qinghui actually thought that everything was planned by her. She deliberately got drunk, she deliberately had sex with him, and she deliberately attracted old Master Li. And she deliberately pretended that it was just an accident, but in the end it couldn't change anything at all. Li Qianxue was such a proud person. So many charges were placed on her at once and she was furious. She didn't have time to clarify things with Su Qinghui. She found out that she was pregnant. At that time she thought, didn't Su Qinghui say that I planned it? Didn't you say that I did it on purpose? I did it on purpose. Li Qianxue, who was proud and couldn't bear the slightest grievance, went to Xiang Kaiping and told her that she was pregnant. She told her that if Su Qinghui really loved her, he would have been married a long time ago. What did she mean by drunk? If it wasn't for Li Qianxue and his heart, how could Su Qinghui be in a mess? She told Xiang Kaiping that Su Qinghui just treated her as a little sister and pitied her. He liked women like her. Even if he wasn't now, he would be in the future. That time she successfully defeated Xiang Kaiping and made Xiang Kaiping retreat. What about this time? Author's words. P.S. Some people don't quite understand the relationship between Xiang Kaiping and Su Qingsang. Let me explain here. First, Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao went to Rong City once, around the Mid-Autumn Festival. Not long after that, Xiang Kaiping came to Lin City. She stayed by Su Qingsang's side until the first lunar month. Nearly 4 months. The two of them really got along like mother and daughter, which was the foundation of their relationship. But not long after Li Qianxue met Su Qingsang returned to Rong City. Embarrassed? In terms of time spent together, Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping had spent more time together. Second, Li Qianxue treated Su Qingsang very well, but for so many years, Li Qianxue had always given Su Qingsang the feeling of being superior. No matter how much she wanted to be close, the feeling of alienation for more than 12 years needed time to get rid of. Especially before, Li Qianxue had made things difficult for Su Qingsang again and again for Su Peixian. Su Qingsang didn't mean that she would bear a grudge. But she would always be less casual. After all, Li Qianxue gave people the feeling that she was arrogant and superior. Secondly, from the beginning, Xiang Caiping's identity was in a state where she wanted to please Su Qingsang, so Su Qingsang felt pity and sympathy for her. This kind of mentality was actually very easy to understand. It was that you looked strong and I felt that I might not have to pay attention to you all the time because you were strong. But the other person was very weak and that person was pitiful. Especially since Xiang Caiping's daughter was sent to prison by Hua Jinyao, in Su Qingsang's heart, Xiang Kaiping was a weak person. People would instinctively sympathize with the weak. This was the same logic. Chapter 633. Li Qianxue squeezed the phone in her palm and felt the faint sweat seeping out. He looked in the direction of the kitchen and forced himself to be patient. She would not lose. Whether it was before or now. Su Qingsang would definitely choose her, that was why she thought so. Li Qianxue thought so in her heart, but at that moment she heard the sound of knocking on the door. Her heart skipped a beat. Was Su Qingsang back? She sat there for a long time without opening the door. Someone knocked on the door a few more times. Li Qianxue closed her eyes and Xiang Kaiping walked out of the kitchen. She looked at her, she also looked at her. Li Qianxue, who hid her emotions well, saw a hint of nervousness in Xiang Caiping's eyes. Suddenly she smiled and got up to open the door. In fact, Li Qianxue's heart was beating very fast. If the person who came was really Su Qingsang, she was not sure if she would really be on her side. The door opened. The man standing outside was Su Qinghui. Seeing that it was him, Li Qianxue was stunned for a moment, and at the same time she felt inexplicably relieved. "Why are you here?" Su Qinghui didn't say anything. He looked past her and at Xiang Kaiping, who was standing behind him. She wore an apron and stood there with a complicated expression on her face. Su Qinghui looked at Li Qianxue and then at Xiang Kaiping. Even if the two of them did not speak, he could smell the thick smell of gunpowder in the air. He took a step forward and stood in front of Li Qianxue. Su Qinghui lowered his voice and begged for balance. "Qianxue, come back with me." Li Qianxue suddenly laughed. "This is my daughter's home. You want me to go back with you? Back to where? You'll make things difficult for Qingsang." She should have known that she would make things difficult for me when she brought Xiang Kaiping to this house. Li Qianxue's expression was a little cold. She knew it would make things difficult for me, but she still did it. Now that she's in a difficult position, it's her own business. Su Qinghui was speechless. His expression was a little conflicted. "Qianxue, don't be like this." "Don't want what?" Li Qianxue found it ironic. She smiled playfully and said, "Su Qinghui, so many years have passed. You haven't changed at all. You used to want me to back down and you still do. I'm telling you, I'm not returning it today." Su Qinghui didn't look too good. He was worried about Su Qingsang, not Xiang Kaiping. "I just don't want to put my daughter in a difficult position." Li Qianxue smiled and the sarcasm in her eyes deepened. "Do you not want to put your daughter in a difficult position, or do you want to protect your old lover?" "Qianxue, you know very well, I don't know." Li Qianxue narrowed her eyes and her expression was very cold. "You and Qingsang are really father and daughter. Even the things they do are the same and the way they think is the same." "Qianxue? Say no more." Li Qianxue listened impatiently. "I won't back down. Let me tell you, Li Qianxue, will never back down." "Qianxue, why are you doing this? Why bother? If you like your old flame and want to be with her, that's your business. But Qingsang is my daughter. I had been wronged for so many years and I owed her for so many years. She values relationships and can't let go of some of the past. I don't mind and I'm willing to give her time, but I won't give her chances again and again like I did to you back then. I won't let her hurt my feelings unscrupulously." Li Qianxue's words made Su Qinghui silent. He stood there and didn't move for a long time. 2 days. Xiang Caiping's voice suddenly sounded behind them. The two of them turned to look at her. Xiang Kaiping stood there looking conflicted. Li Qianxue, give me 2 days. I will leave on my own. You don't need to chase me away, nor do you need Qing Sang to chase me away. Su Qinghui looked at her without saying anything. Li Qianxue crossed her arms in front of her chest and looked at her with slightly narrowed eyes, her eyes full of suspicion. I'm telling the truth. I will leave on my own in 2 days. Xiang Kaiping seemed to know that Li Qianxue wouldn't believe her. The Mid-Autumn Festival is in 3 days. I promised Qing Sang to make mooncakes for her. I don't want to go back on my word. Li Qianxue, I'm not afraid of losing, nor am I so unconfident that Qing Sang will definitely choose you. I understand how you feel. If we were in each other's shoes, I wouldn't want Su Peijian to choose you. I only need 2 days. 2 days is enough for me to finish what I promised Qing Sang. I will leave on my own then. And I can also promise. I will never see Qing Sang again. At least she wouldn't take the initiative to look for Su Qing Sang. If Su Qing Sang and Hua Jinyao wanted to look for her, she would also avoid them and not see them. Li Qianxue stood at the door and looked at Xiang Kaiping, not in a hurry to speak. You don't believe me? Xiang Caiping's voice was a little anxious. I promised you that I would leave, so naturally I won't stay. Just like I wouldn't fight with you for Su Qinghui in the past, I won't fight with you for Qing Sang now. No matter what, Su Qing Sang would always be Li Qianxue's daughter. She knew this very well. That's because you can't fight with me. Li Qianxue's words made Xiang Caiping's face turn a little pale. After saying that, she felt that it was boring. All right. Li Qianxue waved her hand. 2 days it is, but don't put on that face again. It's like I'm bullying you. She didn't want to stay, so she turned around and left. Su Qinghui looked at Xiang Kaiping with a somewhat complicated expression, then quickly followed behind Li Qianxue and left. After entering the elevator, Li Qianxue stood opposite Su Qinghui. Your old lover is suffering right now. What? Don't you need to comfort her? I want to comfort you more. What do I have to comfort you about? Li Qianxue raised her chin slightly, her face was full of pride and arrogance. I won, didn't you hear? She knew that she would lose to me, so she voluntarily withdrew. Qianxue. He knew, and she also knew that some things weren't like that. Don't talk, I don't want to listen to you right now. Li Qianxue rubbed her forehead and turned to look at the mirror wall in the elevator, ignoring Su Qinghui at all. As soon as Li Qianxue returned to the hotel, she went into her room and ignored everything Su Qinghui said. Su Qinghui called twice but didn't hear a reply, so he had to stop. He had to meet a client in the afternoon, and there were 2 contracts to discuss. Su Qinghui, who had left the Li family, had to work harder than before if he wanted to succeed. As a man in his 40s, he was under a lot of pressure to start all over again. He didn't want to fail, nor was he willing to fail. Only if he succeeded again would he have more confidence to stand next to Li Qianxue. Before leaving, he ordered a Chinese meal for Li Qianxue and left a note. He told her to look for him if there was anything, although Su Qinghui knew that the chances of this were very low. What he didn't expect was that when he came back at night, Li Qianxue was actually drinking again. There were a few empty bottles on the table in the living room. Li Qianxue was still sitting on the sofa outside. There were 2 bottles on the coffee table, one of which was already empty. Li Qianxue picked up the other and poured it into a cup. The smell of alcohol made Su Qinghui realize that Li Qianxue had probably drunk a lot. Without thinking, he stepped forward and reached out to snatch her cup away. Qianxue, stop drinking. Go away. Li Qianxue was in a bad mood today. She wanted to change places, but because she was in a bad mood, she continued to stay here. She didn't change hotels, but it didn't mean that she needed to listen to Su Qinghui. It didn't mean that she forgave Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui knew that Li Qianxue didn't care as much as she showed. Whether it was him or Su Qingsang. Back then, he and Su Qingsang probably made Li Qianxue feel hurt. Seeing that Li Qianxue didn't want a cup and was about to drink from the bottle, Su Qinghui snatched the bottle away. Give it back to me. Li Qianxue was indeed very annoyed. Just a while ago, Su Qingsang had a video call with her. Seeing that she was staying in an environment that was not at home at all, she didn't doubt Su Qingsang's words that she was on a business trip and not in Lin City. If Su Qingsang called back to the Li family in the next 2 days, she would know that she had come to Rong City. Unfortunately, she came to see Su Qingsang, and old Master Li went to see Su Yusin. Therefore, there was indeed no one in the Li family now. She was fine at first, but after chatting with Su Qingsang, Li Qianxue's mood began to sink. Some things could be persuaded to let go of, and she could tell herself that it was okay. But that was just an excuse. In fact, she just couldn't let go of it. In fact, it was okay. Why would Su Qinghui give her wine? He put down the bottle, held Li Qinshua's hand and squatted down beside her. Don't drink any more. It's not good for your health. What does my health have to do with you? Li Qianxue wanted to break free of his hand, but Su Qinghui didn't let go. Not only did he not let go, but he also hugged her. Qianxue, listen to me. Listen to me. If you really feel bad, you can cry it out. Or you can hit me. In his memory, Li Qianxue had almost never cried, except for the time when she recognized Su Qingsang. For so many years she had always been calm and collected. Crying was almost impossible for Li Qianxue. In the past Su Qinghui didn't feel it, but now he was full of heartache. Li Qianxue looked at him expressionlessly. Cry. Who do you think I am? She was Li Qianxue, the daughter of the Li family and the current leader of the Li family. She wouldn't cry. The more she said that, the more Su Qinghui's heart ached. Hugging her body tightly, he held her tightly in his arms. Qianxue, don't be like this. In the past he did not understand. He just hated how aggressive she was and didn't like how domineering she was. But later on he understood that whether she was arrogant or flamboyant, it was just her performance. Her heart was like any other woman's. Longing for love, needing love. Li Qianxue struggled a few times but to no avail. She was too lazy to struggle. She was a little dizzy after drinking and her mind was a little messy. She blinked and looked at Su Qinghui in front of her. She found him annoying no matter how she looked at him. Su Qinghui, are you laughing at me in your heart too? I didn't. How could he laugh at her? I'm not gentle and I can't do it. I can't do housework. I can't clean the house either. I don't know how to cook, nor do I know how to make desserts and mooncakes to make people happy. To put it bluntly, I'm actually a woman with nothing but my family background. She's different. She's gentler and more capable than I am. You're better at pleasing people than I am. You know how to take care of people and treat them better than I do. Her eyes were stained with tears. She wasn't really depressed. She could withstand the hurt from Su Qinghui in the past. Su Qingsang's actions now didn't hurt her, but she felt a little uncomfortable. She could bear it and she didn't care at all. But now that she was drunk, those hidden emotions were completely revealed. When she saw Xiang Kaiping, she couldn't help but think that she might indeed be inferior to Xiang Kaiping in some ways. That kind of emotion was enough to make her feel self-loathing and disgust. So no wonder all of you chose her. Compared to her, I really seem to be a failure. Qianxue, I didn't choose her. Su Qinghui knew that she wouldn't believe him, but he still had to say, I chose you, do you remember? Li Qianxue ignored him. Su Qinghui didn't mind persuading her further. Not only me but also Qingsang. She also chose you. Do you remember? She didn't have to tell us her background, but she chose to acknowledge you. So you see, Qianxue, whether it's me or Qingsang, we both chose you. Li Qianxue raised her head and stared at Su Qinghui with her eyes that were a little confused because she was drunk. Su Qinghui's gaze didn't waver, and he looked at Li Qianxue with extreme focus. However, Li Qianxue pushed him away and took a big step back. Even though she was drunk, the way she looked at Su Qinghui was still cold. Su Qinghui, you make it sound so nice. Unfortunately, I don't believe you. Qianxue? Don't call me. Li Qianxue waved his hand away, and her eyes were full of resistance. Qingsang chose me because I'm her biological mother. She had no choice. And you? Li Qianxue's voice was full of malice as she pointed at Su Qinghui's chest. You chose me because you don't have a better choice for the time being. Shaking her head, she tried to sober herself up and tapped Su Qinghui's heart with her finger. That new company of yours didn't get the order last month, right? Did you only realize now that the Li Corporation's brand is more useful than you thought? Qianxue. Su Qinghui's expression didn't look good. No matter how many difficulties he encountered in his work, it couldn't compare to Li Qianxue's words. Did I hit the nail on the head? Li Qianxue took a big step back. Her face, which was flushed because she was drunk, unexpectedly had a hint of mockery. Su Qinghui, do you think I'll believe you just because I'm drunk? Ridiculous. She threw this sentence down. Li Qianxue didn't look at Su Qinghui at all. She walked past him and was about to go back to her room to rest. However, she had drunk too much after all. Her footsteps were a little unsteady. When she passed by the balcony door, she accidentally tripped. She was about to fall forward. Su Qinghui caught her in time. After Li Qianxue steadied herself, she quickly waved his hand away and went into the room with a cold face. Su Qinghui was left standing there looking at Li Qianxue's back. His heart was bitter, but it didn't change at all. Chapter 634. Wow. It's so beautiful. Su Qing-sang looked at the ice mooncakes on the table. She couldn't hide the admiration in her eyes. "Auntie, you're amazing." Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qing-sang's pure and clear eyes. Ever since she got pregnant, she had been a little delicate. From time to time she would think about tormenting others. But this torment was only limited to food. In other places she tried not to cause trouble for others. For example, she continued to go to work and she continued to have surgery. This is actually very simple. I don't know how to do it even if it's simple. Su Qing-sang looked at the pattern on the ice mooncake and touched it with her fingers. So cute. Try it. Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qing-sang and sighed softly in her heart. How great would it be if this was really her daughter? Su Peijian was still in prison. She didn't know what would happen to Su Peijian after she came out of prison. Would she recognize her? Xiang Kaiping didn't even know if she would be willing to live with her. In fact, even if Su Peijian was willing, Su Peijian wouldn't be as easily satisfied as Su Qing-sang after living a pampered life for more than 20 years. In this regard, she would really rather Su Qing-sang be her daughter. Delicious. Su Qing-sang didn't notice the complicated look in Xiang Caiping's eyes. She tasted one and said with satisfaction, "It's so delicious. Annie, you're so good. Eat more if you like it. I also bought other ingredients. I'll make egg yolk filling for you tomorrow." "Okay." Su Qing-sang nodded and answered quite impolitely. She answered casually and Xiang Kaiping wasn't angry. In fact, Su Qing-sang was indeed very casual with Xiang Kaiping. Because only casual would not make Xiang Kaiping feel uncomfortable. With Xiang Caiping's personality, if Su Qing-sang really got along with her carefully, Xiang Kaiping would definitely feel uncomfortable and wouldn't be so reluctant to stay here. Xiang Kaiping packed up her clothes. She could leave after making the mooncakes tomorrow. Looking at the room she had lived in for more than a month, she felt a little reluctant. In fact, how could revenge be more important than making himself comfortable? Unfortunately, no matter how good this place was, it wasn't a place that belonged to her. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door and saw that it was Hu Jinyao standing outside. "Auntie." "Jinyao? Auntie is folding clothes?" Hu Jinyao glanced at the pile of clothes on the bed. "Am I disturbing you?" "Nope. Come in." She let Hu Jinyao in and he closed the door behind him. His attitude made Xiang Caiping's heart skip a beat, and her expression turned serious. "What's wrong with Qing-sang?" She's fine. She's taking a shower now." Hu Jinyao glanced at Xiang Caiping's room. His apartment was made up of 2 apartments and all the rooms had been expanded so it was very large. Even if it was a guest room, there was a bathroom and changing room. After Xiang Kaiping moved in, Su Qing-sang added some things to the room. Now the room was much livelier than before. He didn't speak and Xiang Kaiping didn't know what to say. "What's the matter, Jinyao?" "Yes, there is something." Hu Jinyao sat down on the sofa in the room. He didn't rush to speak and his expression seemed a little solemn. "If you have something to say, just say it." Xiang Kaiping had a feeling that she knew what Hu Jinyao was going to say. "Auntie." After nearly a minute of silence, Hu Jinyao finally said, "Thank you for taking care of Qing-sang for the past month. You've taken good care of her. She's also in a much better condition than before. Today she had a checkup at the hospital. Everything is normal and she's very healthy. It's all thanks to you." "It's nothing. Qing-sang doesn't mind." "Of course it's thanks to you. If it weren't for you, Qing-sang would still be vomiting. I'm really grateful to you." "Jinyao," Xiang Kaiping interrupted him. "If you have something to say, just say it." "Actually, it's nothing." Hu Jinyao found it very difficult to say. "Qing-sang's mother is here. She's living in a hotel now." Silence. Hu Jinyao couldn't continue. In fact, the 5-star hotel was owned by Tang Mohan's family. He happened to be looking for Tang Mohan today, and accidentally saw Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui came to Rong City but didn't come to see Su Qing-sang. This was normal, but Su Qing-sang didn't know at all. This wasn't normal. He asked around and found out that apart from Su Qinghui, Li Qinxue was also staying in the hotel. Li Qinxue didn't come today. She had come yesterday. The last time she came, she stayed in directly. This time she didn't. What? There was only one explanation. Li Qinxue saw Xiang Kaiping. He wasn't as ostrich as Su Qing-sang, nor was he as naive as Su Qing-sang. Yes, Su Qing-sang actually knew that Xiang Kaiping and Li Qinxue couldn't get along well. They couldn't even stay in the same place. But now that she was pregnant, her emotions were sensitive and changeable. She thought that she could handle this kind of balance. But Hu Jinyao wouldn't be so naive. He knew better than anyone that Xiang Kaiping and Li Qinxue had a knot that couldn't be untied. Xiang Kaiping looked at Hu Jinyao's expression and already understood what he wanted to say. You don't want Li Qianxue to see me and know that I'm staying in Qingsang's house. You don't want me to have a conflict with Li Qianxue, so you want me to leave now? Auntie, Qingsang's mother can't stay here forever. Hu Jinyao was halfway through his sentence and couldn't continue. Even he himself felt that his behavior was too much. When he needed her, he called her over. Now that he didn't need her, he asked her to leave. How could there be such a reason? I understand. Xiang Caiping's expression was quite calm. I'll leave tomorrow. Don't worry. Auntie? Hu Jinyao's expression was guilty and a little awkward. Xiang Kaiping smiled. In fact, I planned to leave anyway. It's just that I couldn't let go of Qingsang. Now that her mother is here, I believe she will take good care of Qingsang. There was silence. Hu Jinyao didn't know what to say. In terms of time spent together, Xiang Kaiping and Su Qingsang had spent more time together. He knew that Su Qingsang was partly because of guilt and partly because of sympathy. If Su Qingsang really had to choose, she would also choose Li Qianxue. But now that she was pregnant, Hu Jinyao didn't want Su Qingsang to face such a problem, so he was the bad guy. Su Qingsang just needed to live her own life and give birth to the child safely. It's okay. Don't feel guilty. In fact, I shouldn't have come. Auntie, don't say that. Hu Jinyao rarely did such things. It didn't feel good to be the bad guy. It's really okay. Xiang Kaiping had decided to leave a long time ago, but it wasn't because of Hu Jinyao's decision. Go back and accompany Qingsang. I'll pack my things and leave tomorrow. Auntie? Hu Jinyao stood up with a guilty expression. What can I do for you? He could give her money, but that would be an insult to Xiang Kaiping. Moreover, she wouldn't take his money. However, after saying this, he felt a little regretful. If Xiang Kaiping had asked him to get Su Peizhen out, he really wouldn't have been able to do it. It's okay, I don't want anything. After Su Peizhen went to prison, she took over the supermarket again. She wasn't idle now. Hu Jinyao nodded. Before leaving, he looked at Xiang Kaiping and spoke very sincerely. Auntie, Qingsang and I will visit you when we have time. No need to come. Xiang Kaiping refused. If you come too often, Li Qianxue will be unhappy. Don't worry. I'm not at the age of 70 or 80. I can take care of myself. What she said made sense, but Hu Jinyao felt a little sad when he heard it. When he returned to the room, Su Qingsang was drying her hair. Seeing this, Hu Jinyao stepped forward to take the task and took the initiative to dry Su Qingsang's hair. Where have you been? I answered a phone call. Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang's tightly closed eyes and knew that she didn't know anything. However, he couldn't help but think, if Xiang Kaiping left tomorrow, Qingsang? Yes. After drying her hair, Hu Jinyao put the hairdryer aside. He squatted in front of Su Qingsang and looked at her. The Mid-Autumn Festival is coming soon. I know. She had already eaten mooncakes before the festival. Of course, she knew that the Mid-Autumn Festival was coming. Your mother might come to see you on the Mid-Autumn Festival. Su Qingsang was stunned. She blinked and looked at Hu Jinyao, then suddenly lowered her head. Hu Jinyao. Auntie said that she will leave tomorrow. This kind of thing couldn't be hidden. If Su Qingsang still went to look for her after Xiang Kaiping left, it would only make things difficult for everyone. Auntie is leaving? Where is she going? Where can she go? Back to her own home. Hu Jinyao held her hand and looked at her attentively. Qingsang, Auntie has her own life. We can't force her to stay. Su Qingsang was silent. She understood. But she was a little reluctant. If Auntie stays alone, I'm afraid she won't eat well or take good care of herself. Qingsang, that has nothing to do with you. But, Qingsang, I really want to ask you, in your heart, who is more important, your mother or Auntie? Hu Jinyao interrupted her. This question was very sincere. Su Qingsang pursed her lips, looked into Hu Jinyao's eyes and said without hesitation. Of course it's my mother. Since you said that, why? Su Qingsang knew what Hu Jinyao meant without saying the rest of the sentence. My mother is very good. Annie is also very good. In my heart, I never thought of comparing them. Su Qingsang could tell the truth in front of Hu Jinyao. But I feel very guilty about Auntie. Those things have nothing to do with you and those problems weren't caused by you. I know. She understood Hu Jinyao's words and understood them. But understanding was one thing, and not being able to get over the hurdle in her heart was another thing. She mistook me for someone else. When she took care of me in Lin City, my relationship with her was getting better and better, and I really regarded her as my mother. But who knew that she wasn't? When I didn't know who my biological mother was, I wanted to make the best of the mistake. Because I could tell that Auntie liked me very much and I liked her very much. I didn't expect that my biological mother would be Li Qianxue, who I had always been in awe of, but I couldn't hate. Su Qingsang's belly was already slightly bulging. She looked at her belly and thought about her struggle at that time. At that time I was actually very hesitant and conflicted. I wanted to acknowledge my mother. I didn't want to hurt Auntie. But I didn't expect that I would still hurt her. She didn't give Xiang Kaiping any time to adjust. Instead, after acknowledging Li Qianxue, she immediately let Xiang Kaiping know the truth. She could have had a more compromising way. I said, "That's not your responsibility." "Yes, it's not my responsibility." Su Qingsang sighed. "If she could live a better life later, I wouldn't feel so guilty. But look at the things that happen later. Which one of them could make her feel better? If Su Peixian could be like me and really want to acknowledge her and live a good life with her, I wouldn't feel so bad." But Su Peixian didn't want to get along well with her. Not to mention that she went astray. Speaking of which, Su Peixian deserved to be in prison. But Auntie became even more pitiful because of this. "Qingsang, what about your mother?" Hua Jinyao didn't believe that she didn't understand, nor did he believe that she couldn't think of it. "If your mother knew that you and Auntie were living together again and that you treated her so well, what do you think your mother would think?" Su Qingsang's little face suddenly turned a little pale. She couldn't say anything. She did feel guilty about this. She was indeed in the wrong. "Jinyao, do you think that I did something wrong? What else? Do you want to say that you did the right thing?" You just like the more casual atmosphere when you get along with Auntie, right? Then don't you get along with your mother casually?" "Not really." Su Qingsang admitted that Li Qianxue was a mother who loved her child very much. She also knew that Li Qianxue wanted to make up for it and was very good to her. However, Li Qianxue's desire to make up for it made her feel a lot of pressure. "Auntie was actually like that before. You should be able to tell that I wasn't used to it. Later, when that kind of person became my mother, I was even more not used to it." In the past few years, Li Qianxue felt that she owed Su Qingsang, so she was even more exaggerated and careful than Xiang Kaiping when it came to Su Qingsang. One had to know that the impression that Li Qianxue gave her had always been that she was high and mighty, and she had always been above everyone else. But now she suddenly changed her style. She seemed to be very afraid that she would be unhappy and wanted to be good to her. She was actually a little overwhelmed. A relationship that was too stressful would make people feel at a loss. "I know that my mother is very good, and I also want to get along with her like a normal mother and daughter. But every time she looks at me with self-blame, guilt, and feeling that she owes me, it makes me feel very stressed. Even though I've told her that what I said has nothing to do with her." Hua Jinyao understood and understood everything. "Are you trying to say that your mother makes you feel tired?" "A little bit." Su Qingsang bit her lip and thought of something that happened when she went to Lin City last time. That day, Li Qianxue was in the study and saw old Master Li discussing a calligraphy and painting that she had just taken. She had never received any training in that area since she was young, so she didn't know anything about calligraphy and painting or antiques. Grandpa and Li Qianxue were talking enthusiastically, and she also found it very interesting listening to them. It wasn't that she was interested, but that she had little contact with this kind of culture before. However, the atmosphere was clearly very good, but when Li Qianxue saw her expression she thought of the past 20 years. For Li Qianxue, if she hadn't changed the child, Su Qingsang wouldn't have been like she was now, knowing nothing and knowing nothing. When she thought of it, she couldn't help but start to blame herself and feel guilty. This kind of emotion made Su Qingsang feel a little pressured. She didn't think that she had to know calligraphy and painting or antiques. Everyone had their own things that they were good at. It was as if she had watched Hua Jinyao play chess with old Master Hua. She roughly knew the rules of Go, but she still didn't know how to play it. She didn't think that it was a shameful thing that she didn't know how to play those things, but Li Qianxue cared a lot about it. In those few days, whenever she was free, she would drag her along, wanting to make up for the lessons that she had lost. Li Qianxue blamed herself and regretted missing the best period and not being able to cultivate Su Qingsang into a real lady. The more she blamed herself, the more uncomfortable Su Qingsang felt. She didn't need that kind of emotion. That wasn't Li Qianxue's fault. In fact, she was also a victim. But no matter what she said, Li Qianxue would have felt better at that time. But as long as there was a chance, as long as she discovered that there was something that Su Peixian could do and Su Qingsang couldn't, she couldn't help but fall into that kind of self-blame, guilt, and the desire to make up for it. Su Qingsang had never said these words to Hua Jinyao. He had never thought that there was such a layer of relationship between Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping. "You should have told your mother." "Why should I?" Su Qingsang had a headache. I told her. I said that I don't blame anyone. I don't hate anyone. Especially Li Qianxue. She didn't need to feel guilty or make up for it. It was good for her to be like this. You like Auntie because Auntie never gave you such pressure before? Hu Jinyao was very clear about this. When Xiang Kaiping first came, she was a little restrained. After she understood, she just wanted to be good to Su Qingsang. That kind of guilt and compensation had always been in her heart, but she didn't show it. After all, to Xiang Kaiping, Su Qingsang was an illegitimate daughter. With her current appearance, she became a doctor. She married Hu Jinyao. Xiang Kaiping didn't have other children, so there was no comparison. She knew that her daughter was living a good life. Her life could be considered complete. She felt very satisfied and at ease. But Li Qianxue was different. She had raised Su Peixian and had other children. There was a comparison. When the two were compared, the feeling of self-blame that was originally only 3 points could be magnified to 10 points. What's more, she was already very guilty. Su Qingsang didn't say anything, but she didn't deny it. There was no doubt that she loved Li Qianxue. But it was also true that Li Qianxue made her feel some pressure. It was true that she sympathized and pitied Xiang Kaiping, but it was also true that Xiang Kaiping made her feel more relaxed. Chapter 635. For Su Qingsang, whether it was marrying Hu Jinyao or reuniting with Xiang Kaiping, she never saw herself as a member of their social class. After all, in her eyes, Hu Jinyao was just a low-level employee. After they got married, he treated her so well that she didn't even see him as a CEO. Although Xiang Kaiping had her own business in Rong City, she was still far from being a real rich family. It was always easier to get along with people of the same level. Honey. Hu Jinyao stopped talking. He reached out and put his arm around Su Qingsang. He glanced at the call history on her back and gently hung up the phone. Su Qingsang didn't feel it at all. She just leaned against Hu Jinyao's chest and said, "Do you think I'm too willful?" "I won't." His wife was always right no matter what she did. He could do whatever he wanted. Su Qingsang smiled and rubbed her head against his chest. She was satisfied with his unconditional indulgence. However, there were indeed some things that needed to be resolved. After thinking for a while, he said, "Tomorrow I will send Auntie off." Then I called my mom and asked her to come over and spend the Mid-Autumn Festival with me. Do you think my mother will be willing? Yes, of course. Su Qingsang sighed softly. What else can we do for Auntie? Don't do anything. Hu Jinyao believed that she would understand. Auntie is not a weak person. She doesn't need our sympathy and pity. I hope Su Peixian will take good care of Auntie after she comes out. I think that's what she wants the most. Xiang Kaiping took the mooncakes out of the oven. Su Qingsang happened to be standing in front of the kitchen. Her luggage was already packed and placed in the living room outside. She had known about it yesterday, but when she saw the luggage, she still felt a little sad. She also felt that she was not only willful, but also a little reckless. Call him over when you need him and let him leave when you don't need him anymore. You're up? Xiang Kaiping put the mooncake on the counter and looked at Su Qingsang with a faint smile on her face. Auntie? Su Qingsang looked ashamed. Xiang Kaiping knew what she was going to say. He gave Auntie Yu a few instructions and asked her to put the mooncakes away. It had just been roasted, so it had to cool down before it could be packed. After that, she washed her hands and walked to Su Qingsang. Don't say anything, I know. Auntie. Su Qingsang lowered her head. The more Xiang Kaiping behaved like this, the more upset she felt. I'm leaving. Xiang Kaiping glanced at the house in front of her. You're not alone now. Be it in the hospital or at home, you have to be careful. It was still early in the month, and it would be inconvenient for her to move around if she got older. You're a doctor yourself. If there's anything you know better than me, I won't say anything. Su Qingsang felt a little uncomfortable, as if something was stuck in her throat. Auntie, don't cry. Crying is not good for pregnant women. Xiang Kaiping glanced at Su Qingsang's belly. After the baby is born, it may not be convenient for me to visit you. Just give me a call and tell me you've given birth. Su Qingsang was speechless and could only nod heavily. Xiang Kaiping went to get her luggage and Su Qingsang followed her. Auntie, let me give you a lift. There's no need. I've called a taxi. Xiang Kaiping smiled. I still have to thank you. I even know how to call a taxi now. Su Qingsang couldn't smile. When Xiang Kaiping lived here, she did teach her some common apps. She insisted on seeing Xiang Kaiping out. While waiting for the elevator, Xiang Kaiping looked at her with a complicated expression. All right. There's something I think I need to tell you. What? Your mother came the other day. Su Qingsang was stunned. Li Qianxue came? She knows that you've been living here for more than a month. Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qingsang's stunned expression and reached out to pat her on the shoulder. She's not very happy. I'm not saying this to sow discord. I just want to tell you that maybe you need to apologize to her. Su Qingsang felt a little dizzy until Xiang Kaiping left. She had planned to call Li Qianxue after Xiang Kaiping left, but now she was a little afraid. Li Qianxue knew that Xiang Kaiping was here, so she should be angry, right? Li Qianxue didn't sleep well last night. When she woke up in the morning she was a little tired. Her forehead hurt, and she felt that she had caught a cold. Qianxue? Are you awake? Su Qinghui's voice sounded outside. Li Qianxue didn't want to move, nor did she want to get up. Qianxue? Are you okay? Su Qinghui was a little worried and asked a few more questions. Li Qianxue turned over and pulled the blanket up to cover her head, completely ignoring him. She didn't make a sound, and Su Qinghui was even more worried. He kept knocking on the door. Li Qianxue was helpless. She had a headache from the knocking on the door, so she had to get up and open the door. Su Qinghui, I'm very tired. I'm too lazy to change hotels. It doesn't mean that I accept you disturbing me like this. You don't look good. Su Qinghui didn't seem to see the disgust in her eyes. He looked at Li Qianxue's face and took a step forward. Are you okay? I'm very good. If you don't disturb me, I'll be better. In fact, she just didn't rest well, but what did that have to do with Su Qinghui? You really don't look good. Su Qinghui raised his hand to touch her forehead. Li Qianxue avoided it and took a big step back. Don't touch me. Su Qinghui's hand was raised in midair. Because of Li Qianxue's actions, his face looked a little hurt. Li Qianxue didn't care about his expression at all. She wasn't feeling well now, and not sleeping well gave her a headache. She didn't expect that she would retreat too quickly and almost trip. Qianxue? Su Qinghui quickly reached out to support her. Li Qianxue wanted to retreat, but her body was a little weak. She was forced to snuggle in Su Qinghui's arms and stared at him with cold eyes. Su Qinghui, let go of me. No. Su Qinghui had the habit of working out. All these years he had maintained his figure very well. Seeing Li Qianxue like this, he reached out and easily picked her up. Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue was anxious. Su Qinghui carried her and put her on the bed. He pressed down on her shoulder when she was about to get up. Tell me what you want to do. You need to rest now. You don't need to worry about my business. Su Qinghui looked at her stubborn look. This woman, he didn't know when it started, but she wasn't willing to show any weakness in front of him. She was like a hedgehog wrapping herself tightly with thorns. But what should I do? I don't want to interfere in your business. He reached out and stroked her forehead. When he looked at her pale face, there was a flash of heartache in his eyes. I want to be involved in everything you do in the future, every day of your life. Ha! Li Qianxue sneered and slapped his hand away rudely. Her eyes were full of sarcasm. Su Qinghui, haven't you given me enough nightmares in the past 20 years? You still want to continue in the future? Sorry, I refuse. Su Qinghui's gaze darkened, and there was a hint of depression in his eyes. Li Qianxue didn't care. She turned her face away. Go away. I want to rest. I'll get someone to deliver the food. If you want to sleep, eat something first before you sleep. Su Qinghui, I think I have to remind you again. We're already divorced. I know. Of course Su Qinghui knew. Don't be willful. It's not good for your health. I don't need your hypocrisy. Get out of my sight. Qianxue, I'm sincere. What do I have to do to make you believe me? I won't believe you no matter what. Li Qianxue couldn't stand his hypocrisy the most. Su Qinghui, you've forgotten what you've done and said. I haven't. I've said it before. I'll never forgive you in my life, let alone believe you. Give up. Qianxue? Although she deserved it, Su Qinghui still wanted to explain clearly. Get out. Su Qinghui wanted to say something, but he heard the doorbell ring. He glanced at Li Qianxue. Under her cold gaze, he helplessly turned around and opened the door. Li Qianxue really had a headache. She covered her forehead and thought that she really needed to catch up on sleep. Xiang Kaiping should be leaving today. She originally thought that after that woman left, she would go to Su Qingsang tomorrow. However, after hearing the conversation between Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao yesterday, she suddenly felt that she didn't want to go. Ever since she met Su Qingsang, she had indeed wanted to make it up to Su Qingsang. Therefore, no matter what Su Qingsang said, she felt that she said it was okay because she didn't want to cause trouble for her. However, she neglected the possibility that Su Qingsang really didn't think it was okay. She didn't think that it was a very shameful thing that she didn't learn the 4 arts. She also didn't think that she didn't feel inferior because she didn't receive an orthodox education. When she was an illegitimate daughter, she could adjust her emotions. There was no reason that after becoming a rich daughter, she would feel at a loss. If that was the case, then she wouldn't be her daughter. Because of Su Qingsang's words, Li Qianxue had unprecedented self-doubt. She was still thinking about it when she heard a very soft call of "Mom." Li Qianxue turned around and saw Su Qingsang standing at the door in sportswear, looking at her timidly. "Why are you here?" How did Su Qingsang know that she was here? Did she know that she had gone to look for her? Or did she already know that she had gone to cause trouble for Xiang Kaiping? What would she think? "Mom, are you not feeling well?" At the same time, the voice was accompanied by Su Qingsang's figure walking quickly towards Li Qianxue. Seeing this, Li Qianxue hurriedly stood up. "Walk slowly. It's not like usual now." "Mom, are you not feeling well?" Su Qingsang forgot all the words that she had thought before coming here when she saw Li Qianxue. She reached out to touch Li Qianxue's forehead and was relieved when she found that she didn't have a fever. "Why is your face so pale?" "It's nothing. I didn't sleep well last night." The words "didn't sleep well" could mean many things. Su Qingsang thought of what Xiang Kaiping had said before, and her expression suddenly became a little conflicted. "Mom, I'm sorry." This sudden apology stunned Li Qianxue for a moment. She almost understood what Su Qingsang meant. "You don't have to say sorry. You didn't do me wrong." She was the one who was wrong. Her Qingsang wasn't an ordinary girl, nor was she an ordinary person. The compensation that she thought was right was not what Qingsang wanted at all. This was her fault, not Su Qingsang's. "Mom, don't say that." Su Qingsang didn't realize that her willfulness would make Li Qianxue feel anything before. Now that she saw her pale face, she really felt very guilty and remorseful. "I'm sorry." "Qingsang," Li Qianxue interrupted her. She saw the self-blame in Su Qingsang's eyes and felt very complicated. "I suddenly realized that I'm not a good mother. Or rather, I don't know how to be a mother at all." "Mom?" Her words made Su Qingsang feel even worse. "I'm telling the truth." Li Qianxue hadn't slept well last night and had been reflecting on herself. "In the past, I wanted to educate Su Peijian to be a lady from a noble family. I wanted her to become a qualified daughter of a rich family. But I forgot to teach her how to maintain her own heart. I accepted you. I wanted to be good to you, but I forgot that maybe my kindness to you is not what you need." "Mom." Su Qingsang held her hand and kept shaking her head. I'm sorry. You must feel a lot of pressure when you spend time with me. But I didn't notice at all." "Qingsang, I'm sorry." "Mom?" Su Qingsang was already blaming herself. Hearing her say that, she felt even worse. She threw herself into Li Qianxue's arms and hugged her tightly. "It's all my fault. Mom. I'm begging you to stop." "All right, that's enough." Li Qianxue gently patted Su Qingsang's back. "Are we competing to say sorry now?" Su Qingsang stopped. She bit her lip, and there was still guilt in her eyes. "Okay. It's okay. Let's not talk about it, okay?" Su Qingsang's eyes were red. Ever since she heard from Xiang Kaiping that Li Qianxue had come to Rong City, she had been anxious. Later, she really didn't know how to make Li Qianxue forgive her, so she called Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao gave her advice. "Honey, you can go to her. Tell her what you think. She's your mother. She will understand you." Su Qingsang wasn't sure, but she wasn't a person who would run away. What was wrong was wrong. She had to face her own mistakes. She didn't expect that before she could explain herself, Li Qianxue would apologize to her first, which made her feel even worse. "Mom, I didn't do it on purpose. I said I won't talk about it. Why are you still talking about it?" Li Qianxue held her hand tightly. This was her daughter. She was born after 10 months of pregnancy. At that time, she experienced many twists and turns before she was born, but she accidentally missed more than 20 years of life. No matter what Su Qingsang did, she would forgive her in the end. Moreover, this matter wasn't Su Qingsang's fault. "But what a silly daughter." Li Qianxue patted the back of Su Qingsang's hand. "I understand. You don't have to explain." Su Qingsang looked at Li Qianxue. She suddenly said very seriously, "Mom, I promise you that I won't hide anything from you in the future. I won't lie to you about anything." Okay. Li Qianxue didn't object. "I also promise you that I will respect your opinion in the future and won't give you any pressure." Su Qingsang shook her head gently. "Mom, actually, I'm not afraid of you giving me pressure. But I don't want you to always carry this kind of guilt. I'm really living a good life. I don't need those compensations and I don't need those worldly possessions. Really, it's good that we are like this. Su Qingsang didn't believe in fate, but she believed that everything had a cause and effect. If she was the real daughter of the Su family, she might not have met Hu Jinyao. If she hadn't had the experience of being an illegitimate daughter, she wouldn't have become who she was now. She was very satisfied with her current life and wouldn't blame herself for what she had experienced in those years. Therefore, she didn't want Li Qianxue to always associate those years of her life with bitterness and hatred, as if she owed her a lot. Okay, I promise you. Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang and suddenly smiled. I suddenly realized that I really can't compare to you. Perhaps because she had experienced Su Peixian's resentment, she unconsciously put herself in her shoes and thought that Su Qingsang would have the same emotions. But the reality was that Su Qingsang was Su Qingsang, and Su Peixian was Su Peixian. They were different. Of course not. I can't compare to you, Mom. Su Qingsang relaxed and was in the mood to joke. Actually, since I was a child, I've always admired you, Mom. I think you're a very powerful person. I've been secretly learning from you. Although Li Qianxue wasn't close to her, the years they lived together had subtly influenced her a little. She was mentally strong and wouldn't be defeated by external affairs. Really? Really? Su Qingsang nodded. When I found out that you were my mother, I was so excited. It was just that the time they had spent together was too short, and they hadn't had time to completely eliminate the estrangement of those years. But it didn't matter. It was not too late to slowly eliminate it now. Mom, don't stay in the hotel. Come home with me, okay? Su Qingsang said carefully. She was afraid that Li Qianxue would still mind that Xiang Kaiping had stayed at their house and refused to go back, so she quickly added. I've already asked Auntie Yu to tidy up your original room. Don't worry, it's all new. There were several guest rooms in Hu Jinyao's house. She didn't let Xiang Kaiping stay in the room that Li Qianxue had stayed in before. In fact, she knew very well that no matter how much she sympathized with Xiang Kaiping and how much she wanted to take care of her, Li Qianxue's position in her heart couldn't be surpassed. Li Qianxue looked at her and nodded. Okay. Then let's go now. Su Qingsang stood up and glanced at Li Qianxue. By the way, Mom, where's your luggage? Let me help you pack it. I'll do it myself. Li Qianxue stood up. She had been a little uncomfortable at first, but now that she had talked it out with her daughter, she suddenly felt relaxed and in a much better state. I'll help you. Su Qingsang wanted to help, but at that moment, someone knocked on the door of the room twice. When she saw Su Qinghui standing at the door, Su Qingsang seemed to remember that Su Qinghui was also there. Just now she had wanted to explain to Li Qianxue, but now that she saw Su Qinghui she was a little confused. She glanced at Li Qianxue. Chapter 636. Su Qingsang looked at Li Qianxue in disbelief. She couldn't believe that Li Qianxue would forgive Su Qinghui so easily. Su Qinghui calmly looked at the mother and daughter, as if he didn't feel Su Qingsang's probing gaze. He had just ordered breakfast and it was already served. Qianxue, your breakfast is here. You should eat first. Li Qianxue stood there without moving. Su Qinghui glanced at Su Qingsang and said, Qingsang, why don't you join us? Mom? What was going on? Su Qingsang looked at Su Qinghui and then at Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue's expression did not change. She calmly dragged her suitcase out. Qingsang, let's go. Pack your things and we can leave. Su Qingsang blinked. Did he mean that he hadn't forgiven Su Qinghui? How did the two of them end up living together? Su Qinghui's eyes flashed with bitterness because of Li Qianxue's behavior. Qianxue. Even if you want to leave, you still have to eat. Li Qianxue stopped in her tracks and turned to look at Su Qinghui. She didn't stand on ceremony at all. Su Qinghui, the Li family is not so poor that we can't even afford to eat. Su Qinghui's face was ashen. Although Su Qingsang knew that it was all because of Su Qinghui, who had always been elegant and gentle, showing such an expression in front of her. Especially since he was her father, this kind of feeling made her a little uncomfortable. She turned away from Su Qinghui and went to help Li Qianxue pack her luggage. She was here to apologize today. She couldn't stand on the wrong side again and make Li Qianxue unhappy. Su Qinghui looked at Li Qianxue. She had been uncomfortable just a moment ago, but now she was full of energy because she was about to leave this place in him. Li Qianxue couldn't wait to get rid of him. This realization made his heart ache. Unfortunately, Li Qianxue didn't care about Su Qinghui's feelings right now. She hadn't brought many things over the past 2 days. She hadn't even touched her luggage because she was in a bad mood. In less than 10 minutes, everything was ready. Su Qingsang wanted to help Li Qianxue with her luggage. There was no way Li Qianxue would let her do it. He pulled his luggage and walked out. Su Qinghui followed behind her. "Qianxue, I'll help you." "No need." Li Qianxue avoided his hand and went downstairs with Su Qingsang. When she reached the lobby, she turned and walked to the front desk. Su Qingsang didn't know what she wanted to do, so she followed behind her. She took out her card and paid for the room for the next few days. What was going on? The moment Li Qianxue put the card into her bag, she saw the shock on Su Qingsang's face. She smiled. "I don't even eat his breakfast, so I don't need him to pay for my room." Li Qianxue was Li Qianxue, and Su Qinghui was Su Qinghui. There was no relationship between the two of them. Su Qingsang stood at the side and didn't know what to say. One was his father and the other was his mother. Although they weren't close, the current situation still made her feel a little uncomfortable. Su Qingsang was driven by the chauffeur. As soon as she went out, the chauffeur came over to take Li Qianxue's luggage and put it in the trunk. The mother and daughter got into the car. Su Qingsang glanced at the hotel before the car left. She didn't know if her eyes were playing tricks on her, but she just saw Su Qinghui running down the hall. "Mom?" "Yes." Su Qingsang, who had spoken to Li Qianxue, was no longer as nervous as before. She was a little more casual. "I just want to ask, do you really hate my dad that much? Just because he replaced me in Su-Pasian?" Li Qianxue didn't expect Su Qingsang to ask her such a question. She looked at Su Qingsang and shook her head gently. No. Some things were already in the past. She didn't want to mention it. But not mentioning it didn't mean that those things didn't exist. Dad and I couldn't live on for a long time. Knowing that he secretly swapped my child was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Su Qingsang was silent. She had some understanding of the way Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui got along before. "My dad is really regretting it now. I can see it." She was saying this as a statement. She didn't mean to take sides, nor was she speaking up for Su Qinghui. "He regrets it, so I have to forgive him?" Li Qianxue retorted, then shook her head. "Qingsang, I don't mind telling you. Your dad didn't torture me in a day or two. It wasn't a month or 2 months or even a year or 2 years. It's been more than 20 years, and it's been stabbing me in the heart without interruption." She rarely talked about these things with Su Qingsang. In the past, she always felt that she didn't want to mention it in front of her daughter, but now she realized that there was nothing that she couldn't say. "I used to be willing to endure it for Su-Pasian, for Yusin, and even for your grandfather. But now, I don't want to endure it anymore." She was also pampered by old Master Li as she grew up. She was also an ordinary person with dignity, self-esteem, and would be sad and sad. Su Qinghui's harm to her was like a machete that was constantly waved at a tree. Machete after machete. She used to think that she could heal. She also tried her best to heal the wound every time she was injured. But now she didn't want to get hurt again. "Qingsang, when your body is injured, even if you recover one day, there will be scars. Not to mention the wound in your heart." Su Qingsang understood and stopped trying to persuade her. She slowly moved her face closer to Li Qianxue and rubbed her shoulder. "If you don't want to forgive me, then don't. Anyway, you're my mother. No matter what you do, I will support you." "You?" Li Qianxue was relieved and touched Su Qingsang's face. "Even if you don't support me, you won't change my decision. That's why I have to support you even more." Su Qingsang said with a smile, "To strengthen your confidence." Li Qianxue smiled and felt a little more relieved. She couldn't be bothered to hate the person she wanted to hate now. But she would definitely cherish the person she wanted to cherish. Just as Su Qingsang had said before, she was still young, only in her 40s. She had a chance to slowly walk out of the haze of the past and live the rest of her life well. Xiang Caiping's sudden departure actually made Su Qingsang a little uncomfortable. But this unfamiliarity became very weak because of Li Qianxue's arrival. She brought Li Qianxue to a nearby tea restaurant for breakfast. Then they went home together. After entering the door, she led Li Qianxue to the guest room. As soon as the two of them put down their things, Mizu came to look for them. "Madam, those mooncakes are cold now. You can pack them up. Didn't Sister Xiang buy packaging bags earlier? Do you know where they are?" Su Qingsang and Xiang Caiping had bought the ingredients for the mooncakes together. Mizu didn't know where they were. Su Qingsang was about to answer when she suddenly thought of Li Qianxue, who was still in the room. "Wait a minute. I'll come and get them for you later." Mizu left. Su Qingsang looked at Li Qianxue nervously. "Mom, before, you don't have to say it." "I know." Li Qianxue knew that Xiang Caiping had made mooncakes for Su Qingsang. She also knew that Su Qingsang's meals were made by Xiang Caiping every day. "Mom?" Although she had already said it out loud, Su Qingsang was still a little nervous. It's okay. I'm not jealous. Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang very seriously. When I came to look for you yesterday, she said that she wanted me to give her 2 days. She said that she promised you that she would make mooncakes for you. Yes, Xiang Kaiping promised. But she left as soon as she finished making them. They drove her away in disguise. I'm not jealous, although I'm a little unhappy. Li Qianxue didn't mind letting Su Qingsang know her dissatisfaction. She now understood that although they were mother and daughter and were related by blood, they had never lived together. Whether it was her or Su Qingsang, they both needed time to adapt to such a relationship and increase their intimacy. The most obvious one was to let the other party know your thoughts and understand your thoughts. However, you chose me in the end. I'm very happy. There was a hidden pride in Li Qianxue's tone. Su Qingsang heard it and heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, she went forward and hugged her arm. Mom, of course I chose you. You're my biological mother. Yes, I'm your biological mother. Just this point alone was more than enough for her to win against Xiang Kaiping. Therefore, why should she be unhappy? Why should she ruin her mood because of Xiang Kaiping? No matter what the reason was, 26 years ago, Su Qinghui chose her. 26 years later, her daughter chose her again. She won. Didn't she? Li Qianxue stayed. The next day was the Mid-Autumn Festival. Su Qingsang received a call from Lu Tongjia early in the morning, asking her to go back to the old house for the festival. This year Li Qianxue would also be there. Su Qingsang couldn't let her be alone. Lu Tongjia also knew that Li Qianxue was there, so she asked Su Qingsang to bring her along. Because of some unpleasantness with Li Qianxue before, Lu Tongjia was afraid that she would feel uncomfortable, so she didn't want to come. She even called Li Qianxue herself. This could be considered as giving Li Qianxue a lot of face. Li Qianxue knew that this was Lu Tongjia's show of goodwill. She also understood that Lu Tongjia's current behavior was mostly because of the child in her daughter's belly. But no matter what, at least Su Qingsang wouldn't have problems with her mother-in-law and daughter-in-law in the future, which was already a big relief. Even if Hua Jinyao really didn't care if Su Qingsang always had a bad relationship with Lu Tongjia, it would still be very embarrassing. Now that Lu Tongjia was willing to lower her status, it was enough to let Li Qianxue feel relieved. The Mid-Autumn Festival in the Hua family was similar to the Dragon Boat Festival. Hua Yangxiu's family and Hua Yangyuan's family all came. Because Su Qingsang was pregnant and had twins, she undoubtedly became the focus of everyone present. Among those who cared about her, Hua Mingliang's family was the only one who didn't. Hua Yifan was still sitting in prison. Nian Chunya went to see him a few times. Every time she saw him, she felt more and more upset. She didn't care what her son did. No matter how she blamed it, she could only blame Hua Jinyao for being cold-blooded and old Master Hua for being heartless. Chapter 637. Su Qingsang was pregnant. Xiang Kaiping had been taking good care of her during this period of time, and she had become more plump. After talking things out with Li Qianxue, he looked much better. Hua Jinyao now regarded her as an important person to take care of and protect. Whenever she went out, someone had to follow her. As long as he was at home, he would always be by her side. At that moment, Su Qingsang only frowned slightly, and he immediately brought her a glass of warm water. They did not care that there were other elders and relatives in the living room. Nian Chunya could only feel that her gums were dry and stiff. Her son had been living a good life, but Hua Jinyao just couldn't let go of such a small matter. What about now? The two of them were so happy. Her son was still in prison. Hua Jinyao just needed to get him in. Old Master Hua was also so biased that he didn't take Hua Yifan's side at all. Nian Chunya's expression was very ugly. If there weren't so many relatives present, she would have jumped up, pointed at Hua Jinyao's nose and scolded him. Hua Manzi sat next to her and pinched her arm. She came close to him and her voice was very light. Mom, calm down. Calm down? How could he calm down? Ever since Hua Yifan's accident, she had been unwilling to appear in this house. After all, Hua Mingguang's family was grandfather Hua's closest family. Their family was nothing, right? Nian Chunya had come from a humble family to begin with. She didn't have any foresight. To her, her husband and son were the most important. She didn't care about the family's honor. Now, her son was in jail because of Hua Jinyao, but Hua Jinyao seemed to have become a winner in life. He had everything he wanted, which was very difficult for her to accept. Especially after seeing Hua Yifan, the contrast was even more obvious. Look, it's a holiday now, but they're all so lively here. What about Hua Yifan? He was alone in that cold prison. He had no family, no freedom. Nian Chuanya's heart was filled with hatred, and she exerted more force. Huamanzi unclasped her fingers little by little and gently stretched them out. Manzi? A little impatience spoils great plans. Huamanzi's voice was very soft. The future is long and now is the time for them to show off. It's not suitable to go against them. Nian Chuanya knew this was the truth, but she couldn't help it. Do you have a plan? No. Huamanzi glanced in Su Qingsang's direction. Li Qianxue was also here today. Ever since Su Qingsang was pregnant, Lu Tongjia's attitude toward her had changed. Before, they could see Lu Tongjia making things difficult for Su Qingsang. But now Lu Tongjia and Su Qingsang were like mother and daughter. The better they lived, the worse Huamanzi felt. Her emotions were the same as Nian Chuanya's. However, she was smarter than Nian Chuanya in that she wasn't in a hurry to do anything. There would be plenty of opportunities in the future. Old Master Hua had been in a good mood recently. Su Qingsang was pregnant with twins. There were quite a few great-grandfathers around his age, but there weren't many great-grandfathers who could be twins. At a time like this, how could Huamanzi, who knew how to judge the situation, offend Grandfather Hua? Su Qingsang didn't notice the look in Hua Mingliang's eyes at all. She was listening to Lu Tongjia and Li Qianxue talk about their pregnancies. It seemed that all mothers had this habit. Once they found out that someone around them was pregnant, they couldn't wait to repeat the symptoms of their pregnancy at that time. She was a doctor herself. In fact, these symptoms were very clear as early as when she was in school. However, everyone's reaction was different. She found it quite interesting to listen to them. Old Master Hua was in a good mood and chatted with Hua Yangyuan and Hua Yangxiu. When he saw Uncle Cheng enter the door, he stood up with a smile. The last guest is here. We can start eating. Everyone present looked in the direction of the door because of Old Master Hua's words. The others' expressions didn't change, but Li Qianshue's face suddenly darkened. She didn't expect Old Master Hua to invite Su Qinghui. Qinghui is here? Come and sit down. Old Master. Su Qinghui came to Rong City for business. After finishing his business, he deliberately chose a long time to visit Old Master Hua. Old Master Hua knew that he was also in Rong City, so he called him to the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet today. I'm late. I'm sorry. Su Qinghui handed over the gift in his hand as he spoke. Old Master Hua didn't open the gift. He just glanced at Uncle Cheng and asked him to take it. He looked at Su Qinghui with a faint smile in his eyes. It's good that you're here. Don't do these things next time. It's just a little plaything. I'm glad that you don't mind. Li Qianxue sat there. The cheerful appearance of talking with Lu Tongjia just now was completely gone. She sat there with a cold face and looked at Su Qinghui with undisguised disdain. However, there were too many people from the Hua family today. They were all relatives of the Hua family. No matter how reluctant she was, she couldn't directly embarrass Su Qinghui. She could only watch as Su Qinghui sat down next to her and squeezed into the seat between her and Qingsang. Qianxue. Su Qinghui looked at Li Qianxue. She was still very beautiful today. She had always been the focus of the crowd. No matter where he was, he could recognize Li Qianxue at a glance. I thought I was going to pick you up. I didn't expect you to come with Qingsang. Li Qianxue completely ignored Su Qinghui's words. Her heart had already turned cold, so she naturally wouldn't pay attention to Su Qinghui. Let's go together later, Su Qinghui said quite casually, as if they were still husband and wife and hadn't divorced yet. Li Qianxue didn't want to tacitly agree to such a thing. Just as she was about to refute, Old Master Hua had already received Aunt Zhou's instructions and could start the banquet. Let's go. Let's eat. Today is a good day. I'm happy, so I want to drink a few more glasses. Grandpa, even if you're happy, you should drink less. Your blood pressure can't drink too much. Su Qingsang's timely concern made Old Master Hua laugh. He waved his hand and said, Let's not worry about blood pressure today. I'm happy anyway. Let's go. Let's eat. After being interrupted like this, Li Qianxue didn't have a chance to speak at all. Not only that, after they entered the restaurant, Li Qianxue found that her seat was actually arranged with Su Qinghui's. This made her expression even more unpleasant. She couldn't help but look in Su Qingsang's direction, wanting her to come over and change seats with her. However, today Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui came as in-laws. In order to show that they were biological relatives, Old Master Hua arranged Su Qinghui and Li Qianshue's seats next to him. On the other side of him sat Hua Yangyuan and his wife, Hua Yangxiu and his wife. Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang were further down. In this way, Li Qianxue couldn't even change seats, because that would be too much of a movement, and it would make a joke of herself. It wasn't that Su Qingsang didn't see Li Qianshua's pleading eyes, but she couldn't help her for the time being. Su Qingsang heard Zhang Yichen's name when old Master Huo was talking to Huo Yangxiu and his wife. Huo Yangxiu was full of helplessness when she talked about her youngest son. Some time ago, Zhang Yichen volunteered to be an instructor at a newly established base. It was estimated that he wouldn't be back for 2 or 3 years. I don't know what's wrong with him. It's said that he trains for more than 10 hours every day. Those new soldiers are miserable under his training. What nonsense are you talking about? Zhang Xinghua glanced at her disapprovingly. It's a good thing that our son is ambitious. If those people can't endure it, they will naturally be eliminated. If they can endure it and make a name for themselves, they are the talents we need. Yes, you're right. I'm just worried about my own son, okay? Su Qingsang turned her face at the right time and looked at the piece of fish that Hu Jinyao put into her bowl. It's very tender. Try it. Okay. She still felt a little nauseous these days, but at least she didn't throw up anymore. She also knew that as the months went on, it would be more and more torturous. Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang's eyes. It seemed that she didn't hear what Hu Yangxiu said at all. He didn't expect Zhang Yichen to go so far away, but it was good. He believed that when Zhang Yichen came back, his child would be born. By then, maybe he would already have a woman he liked. Su Qinghui saw what Hu Jinyao was doing and put a piece of fish into Li Qianshua's bowl. Li Qianshua looked at the piece of fish and resisted the urge to pick it up and throw it at Su Qinghui's face. She gritted her teeth and glared at Su Qinghui with a warning look. Su Qinghui acted as if he didn't see it and put another shrimp into her bowl. This shrimp is good. Try it. I have hands. There were other members of the Huo family around her. Li Qianshua didn't want to lose her composure, and she couldn't. She lowered her voice and the warning look in her eyes became more and more obvious. I can eat it myself. I know you have hands, but I just want to pick up food for you. Can't I? Su Qinghui found that he was really smart. He knew to visit old Master Huo a few days ago. It was such a rare opportunity today. God knew that he hadn't eaten with Li Qianshua since the divorce. He thought that he was affectionate, but Li Qianshua almost wanted to throw up. She couldn't pick up the food in her bowl and throw it at Su Qinghui's face. She could only force herself to ignore it. When Su Qinghui put the food in her bowl for the 3rd time, she clenched the chopsticks in her palm. Su Qinghui, that's enough. She leaned close to his ear, and her low voice couldn't hide her anger at this time. Don't think that I won't fall out with you. Su Qinghui showed a rare faint smile. He turned his face and looked at the anger in Li Qianshua's eyes. Look at the woman he liked. She was so beautiful even when she was angry. If I remember correctly, you've already fallen out with me. Li Qianshua's face was red, but she couldn't lose her temper. Su Qinghui stopped when he was ahead and finally stopped picking up food for her. This meal was very uncomfortable for Li Qianshua. However, old Master Huo turned his head to talk to her from time to time and asked about old Master Li's situation. Li Qianshua could only cheer up and answer. Su Qinghui also said a few words on the side. Obviously, old Master Huo thought that they were going to get married again. They were young people. They quarreled and reconciled. Wasn't that how life was? Those who knew the inside story thought that the two of them were going to get married again. Those who didn't know the inside story always thought that they were a loving couple. Li Qianshua didn't have the chance to explain it all. Soon, someone held a glass of wine and toasted the two of them. After all, they were in-laws of the Huo family. Seeing old Master Huo's attitude when other people came to toast, they all toasted Li Qianshua and Su Qinghui. This made Li Qianshua more and more uncomfortable. When it was almost time to end, she told Su Qingsang that she wasn't feeling well and had to go back to rest. Why go back? If you're tired, just rest here. Old Master Huo waved his hand and directly made the decision for them. There are many guest rooms anyway. Tongjia, have you arranged everything? Don't worry. Dad, everything has been arranged. Lu Tongjia was a qualified mistress of the Huo family. These small things were nothing to her. Li Qianshua wanted to refuse, but Lu Tongjia had already taken her upstairs to the guest room. If you drink too much, go up and rest for a while. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival, and we still have to admire the moon at night. You can rest for a while. Later we'll go to the garden in the back together. I have a few datura flowers that are blooming well. There are also new chrysanthemums. The first batch has also bloomed. We can admire the moon and chrysanthemums later. Li Qianshua couldn't refuse. After entering the door, she had to rest for a while. She was woken up by the ringtone when she was in a daze. When she opened her eyes and saw Su Yusin's name displayed on the screen, she answered the video call from him without hesitation. Mom. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. This time, Old Master Li went to spend the Mid-Autumn Festival with Su Yusen, so Li Qianxue came to Rong City to accompany Su Qingsang. It was the first time Su Yusen had left home, and the first time he hadn't spent the Mid-Autumn Festival with Li Qianxue. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Li Qianxue was in a daze and didn't know what time it was. She sat up. Her voice was a little hoarse after drinking a little. She was about to get up to find a glass of water. There was really a glass of water in front of her. Li Qianxue took it and drank half of it before she realized that the glass of water was actually brought over by Su Qinghui. At the same time, Su Qinghui's figure appeared on Su Yusen's screen. The person on the other side of the screen could see everything clearly. Dad. When Su Yusen saw Su Qinghui's figure, he was stunned. What was going on? Why was Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue together? The two of them were in the same room, and looking at Li Qianxue, it was obvious that she had just woken up. Su Yusen was no longer that naive boy who didn't know anything. He knew what it meant for a woman to wake up in bed with a man next to her. Yusen, Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Compared with Li Qianxue's stunned expression, Su Qinghui seemed much calmer. Are you alone? No, with Grandpa. Old Master Li was sitting behind Su Yusen, so he naturally saw Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui. Qinghui, you. In such a situation, anyone would misunderstand. Dad, Yusen, it's not what you think. How could Li Qianxue let such a misunderstanding happen? She was anxious to explain. She was a little excited and almost couldn't hold the glass in her hand. Su Qinghui took it in time and put it aside. Looking at it now, the two people on the other side of the screen were more likely to misunderstand. Then what is it? Su Yusen looked at Li Qianxue's hair, which was a little messy because of her sleep. Mom, are you going to remarry? No. Li Qianxue answered quickly. Who was going to remarry Su Qinghui? She hated him and couldn't wait to dislike him. Qianxue? Old Master Li wasn't blind just now. He saw clearly that his daughter wanted to drink water, and Su Qinghui poured water for her. It was obvious that they were very familiar with each other, and their coordination was very good. It was as if the two of them often did this. Li Qianxue said that she was going to Rong City to see Su Qingsang, but he didn't expect that she would go with Su Qinghui. It was really surprising. Dad, don't ask. It's really not what you think. I'll explain to you when I come back. After saying this, Li Qianxue looked at Su Yusen. Yusen, take good care of Grandpa. I'll fly to see you in 2 days. Okay. Su Yusen nodded. Li Qianxue quickly hung up the phone and turned to face Su Qinghui. She quickly changed her face and her eyes were obviously angry. Why are you here? What do you think? Su Qinghui sat down next to her and watched as Li Qianxue's body moved back a lot because of his movements. This is the guest room of the Huo family, and we are husband and wife. Of course they arranged for us to be in the same room. Who's husband and wife with you? Li Qianxue didn't accept this excuse. We're already divorced. It doesn't matter anymore. But they don't know. Then why don't you explain it clearly? Why should I explain? Su Qinghui's body leaned forward slightly. Seeing the dissatisfaction in Li Qianxue's eyes, he rarely showed his hooligan side. You don't know how happy I am to be misunderstood. Crazy. Li Qianxue pushed him away and quickly got off the bed from the other side. However, her shoes were placed on Su Qinghui's side. She wanted to leave without putting on her shoes. Su Qinghui saw it and quickly picked up the pair of shoes. He walked around the bed and stood in front of Li Qianxue. Put your shoes on. Put them down. Give me your feet. Su Qinghui reached out his hand to Li Qianxue and gestured for her to give him her feet. Are you going to help me put on my shoes? Li Qianxue took a step back. She didn't intend to cooperate with Su Qinghui at all. Qianxue? Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue looked at the shoes in his hand and then at Su Qinghui's calm face. She sneered. Who are you pretending to be affectionate for? The guest room of the Huo family was covered with a thick carpet. She didn't feel cold even if she stepped on it. She just crossed her arms in front of her chest and looked at the man who was half squatting in front of her. He looked servile and humble. Do you know that every time you show such a look in front of me, I'm not very touched. Instead, I feel like vomiting? Su Qinghui looked at Li Qianxue and knew that she didn't have anything nice to say to him. He also knew that she wouldn't be polite to him. I'm not pretending. I'm serious. And then? Li Qianxue bent down and snatched the shoe from his hand without thinking. She couldn't bear it if he touched her things. I have to be grateful? Kneel down and thank you? Qianxue, that's not what I meant. Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue put on the shoe and bent down to put on the other shoe. After putting it on, she stood up straight and glared at Su Qinghui coldly. Have you forgotten? Once, when we went to a banquet, my shoe was accidentally stuck in a crack in the ground. I asked you to help me take my shoe. What did you say at that time? Su Qinghui didn't lose his memory. On the contrary, ever since he divorced Li Qianxue, the scenes of his life in the past 20 years became clearer and clearer. Of course he remembered what she said. Li Qianxue saw his reaction and knew that he hadn't forgotten. It was good that he hadn't forgotten. You said, who do you think you are? Even if I'm the eldest daughter of the Li family, in your heart I'm nothing. You won't love me and you won't have feelings for me. You told me not to expect you to help me take my shoe even once. You said that, right? Su Qinghui's expression finally changed a little. He maintained his squatting posture and didn't move at all. Li Qianxue didn't want to bring up the past. Some things were in the past. If Su Qinghui could stay away from her, she would never have said these words. There was another time when I excitedly bought a whole new set of clothes for you. Then I went home and wanted you to try them on. When I put the pair of handmade leather shoes in front of you, you said, "Don't say it." Su Qinghui remembered. He hadn't forgotten. Even though that scene had happened more than 20 years ago, he hadn't forgotten it. He didn't let her say it, but Li Qianxue insisted. You said, so I'm really that cheap? I'm even willing to do something like carrying your shoes. Unfortunately, in your heart, I'm not even worthy of carrying your shoes. Right? Don't say it. Qianxue, I beg you, don't say it. Su Qinghui closed his eyes. He didn't want to listen anymore. Li Qianxue didn't want to recall it either. Those memories weren't good at all. After tearing apart the first layer of skin, all that was left were the ugly and embarrassing memories of devastation. Alright, if you don't want to say it, then don't say it. Anyway, I believe in your memory and I won't let you lose your memory. Do you know? Yesterday, Qingseng asked me if I had forgiven you. She asked me if I hated you so much because you changed her and Su Peijian's identities. Do you know what I answered her? I told her. No, at least not completely. Knowing that you changed their identities was just the last straw that broke the camel's back for me. For more than 20 years, your sarcasm, indifference, and sarcasm towards me have been stabbing me in the heart time and time again. Su Qinghui, it's been 26 years. From the moment I fell in love with you until now, I've spent more than 26 years on you. Now, can I beg you? Can you be magnanimous and let me go? After all, I'm not young anymore. I'm no longer a little girl in her early 20s. I really don't have the energy to play this kind of game with you. I love you, but you don't love me anymore. I'm in my 40s and almost 50 years old. I can't afford to mess around. I don't want to mess around either. Please stay away from me in the future. Chapter 638. Here. Li Qianxue pointed to the position of her heart. Her voice was very soft and there was determination in it. It used to be hot and it used to be warm. But now it's cold, dead, and broken. There's nothing left. All of this is because of you, Su Qinghui. So don't think about what you can do to move me. Don't think about asking me to forgive you and give you a chance to start over. Because I have no heart anymore. Su Qinghui couldn't speak. He lowered his head, and the part of his forehead that was covered by his hair blocked his eyes. His expression couldn't be seen. His body was extremely stiff, and he maintained a half-squatting posture without moving. Only his tightly clenched fists revealed some of his emotions. Li Qianxue didn't look at him. Some things were in the past. She didn't want to say it. She was proud. She had once put down her pride in front of Su Qinghui. She had made herself humble and ingratiating. She had once put down all her dignity to love Su Qinghui. She had loved him for 26 years. She had no self, no dignity, and even no bottom line. That wasn't her. It wasn't the real Li Qianxue. Now she refused to remember. She wanted to be herself. That proud, arrogant, and superior Li Qianxue. Forget it. Don't mention it. In the end, she still lost control. She wouldn't admit that Su Qinghui had the ability to make her lose control. She hoped that this would be the last time and that it wouldn't happen again. Today she really couldn't control herself because she had drunk a little. She admitted that she had grievances in her heart, and it was a considerable amount of grievances. She did hate Su Qinghui, not only because he replaced Su Qingsang and Su Peijian's identities, but also because he didn't love her. What she hated the most was that he used her love to hurt her unscrupulously. He used her love for him as a weapon to hurt her. No one would be able to persevere if their sincerity was constantly betrayed and hurt. Those years were too difficult for her and it was too painful. She didn't want that anymore. She slowed down her breathing and calmed herself down. She picked up her bag and left. She asked Su Qingsang to arrange a car to take her home. She would rather go back to Hua Jinyao's apartment and spend time with Su Qingsang than see Su Qinghui's face, which was pretending to be affectionate. The door opened and closed. Su Qinghui lost his strength and sat on the carpet. He didn't lose his memory. He remembered what Li Qianxue remembered. He knew everything he had said and done. Li Qianxue's words only made him understand once again that if he really wanted Li Qianxue to forgive him, it was a goal that would be difficult to achieve no matter how much effort he put in. Or perhaps he would never be able to make Li Qianxue forgive him in this lifetime. His eyes were a little sore and dry. Su Qinghui lowered his head and covered his eyes tightly. The sour feeling came from the regret and reluctance in his heart. He knew that Li Qianxue would not forgive him so easily. But what was he going to do? He really didn't want to let go. Li Qianxue didn't sleep well that night. Maybe it was because of the alcohol or maybe it was because of other reasons. She had a dream that night. The dreams that came one after another made her feel uncomfortable. She woke up after 6 o'clock. When she woke up, Li Qianxue couldn't sleep anymore. After thinking for a while, she went in the direction of the kitchen. For her, taking care of her daughter was much more important than being involved with Su Qinghui. Standing in front of the refrigerator, Li Qianxue stared at the food inside and was stunned for a moment. The last time she cooked seemed to be more than 20 years ago. At that time, she believed in the books that if she wanted to capture a man's heart, she had to capture his stomach first. Therefore, she specially bought a lot of recipes to study, from the 8 major cuisines to home-cooked side dishes to healthy soups. At that time, she spent a lot of effort on cooking. Unfortunately, perhaps because of her limited talent, the food she cooked could only be described as terrible. No matter how simple or homely the dishes were, they would all be ruined by her. After repeated attempts, and after several blisters appeared on her hands, she finally managed to cook something that was barely presentable. She happily brought it to Su Qinghui, but he didn't eat it at all and even mocked her. He said, "Li Qianxue, stop thinking." Yesterday she told herself not to think about it, but now she was still thinking about it. She shook her head and threw away all those messy thoughts. Now, what she needed to think about was how to successfully make breakfast. Should she fry an egg and make an egg sandwich? That shouldn't be too difficult, right? She had all the ingredients. Ever since Su Qingsang got pregnant, she was afraid that she would want to eat something at any time, so the refrigerator at home was filled with ingredients. Li Qianxue first looked up the method on the internet and then found all the ingredients. According to the instructions, she began to fry the eggs first. When Su Qingsang came out of the room, she smelled the hidden burning smell in the air. Because it was the Mid-Autumn Festival yesterday, she gave Auntie Yu the day off. Auntie Yu wouldn't come today. Could it be that Hua Jinyao was cooking? When she saw Li Qianxue standing in front of the kitchen counter and frying an egg, Su Qingsang felt that her eyeballs were about to fall out. "Mom? Qingsang?" Li Qianxue was embarrassed for a moment. She didn't expect her cooking skills to be so bad. It was just frying an egg. The steps on the internet were extremely simple. But, looking at the black eggs in the trash can, she felt a pang of guilt. They were of different degrees but they were all black. "Mom, are you making breakfast?" Li Qianxue became more and more embarrassed. "I wanted to make you an egg sandwich." Su Qingsang looked at her, and her heart felt as if it had been gently pricked by a needle at that moment. It didn't hurt, but it made her feel a little uncomfortable. Who was Li Qianxue? She was actually cooking for her? She was willing to bet that Li Qianxue had never cooked for herself in the past few decades. But now she was thinking of making a sandwich for her. "Mom, let me do it." Su Qingsang calmly put away the emotions on her face and took a few steps forward to stand in front of the kitchen counter. Let's go out to eat. You're pregnant. How can I let you cook?" "It's okay." Su Qingsang smelled the obvious burning smell that even the range hood couldn't hide. "Mom, stand outside a little. Otherwise the smell of smoke will be too strong." "No, you should rest." "I'm too stupid. I don't even know how to cook." "Mom, how can you be stupid? In my heart, you're the smartest." Su Qingsang smiled at Li Qianxue, washed the black bottom of the pot, and took out the eggs again. "Mom, why don't you go outside and rest?" "It's okay. I'll stand here and look at you." Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang's slightly bulging belly. "I always feel that we should go out to eat." "There's no need. How can I be so fragile?" Su Qingsang turned on the fire and poured oil. "Didn't you hear? In the past, people were still working in the fields a few days before they were going to give birth." Although she had never given birth as an obstetrician and gynecologist, she had heard too much in the hospital. Many mothers-in-law or mothers like to tell their daughter-in-law or daughter how hard they had worked back then and how happy they were now when they gave birth. That was in the past and now is now. Li Qianxue watched Su Qingsang put the eggs into the pot nimbly. It was the same process, but Su Qingsang's movements were smoother than hers. Mom, when you fry this egg, don't turn the fire too high. Just turn the fire to medium. Fry this side first. When you feel that the bottom is golden brown, it's almost done. Then turn it over. It won't take too long. When the egg is old, it won't taste good. As she spoke, Su Qingsang had already fried the egg. She scooped it out and continued with the second one. At the same time, she turned around and put the toast into the oven. This is cooked, right? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. But if you roast it, it will taste better later. I like to eat it this way. As Su Qingsang spoke, she continued to fry the second egg. It was just turned over. Li Qianxue blinked. Qingsang, you're amazing. This really isn't amazing. Su Qingsang smiled. She was a little embarrassed by Li Qianxue's exaggerated praise. It's just the simplest. But I don't even know how to do the simplest. But Mom, you know how to make money. As Su Qingsang spoke, she had already fried the second egg. She chatted with Li Qianxue while her hands didn't stop moving. Look, the Li Corporation is so big and there are so many things to do. Mom, you can still do so well. If it were me, I definitely wouldn't be able to do it. That's because you didn't learn. If you learned, you would also be able to do it. Not necessarily. Mom, don't think too highly of me. I really don't have that talent. Su Qingsang made all 3 sandwiches, then cut the first one into 4 pieces and placed them. Okay, another glass of milk. It's done. Try it. Li Qianxue sat down, tasted it, and nodded heavily. Delicious. Qingsang, your cooking is so good. You're the one who doesn't mind. Su Qingsang sat down as well. Just as she took a bite, Hu Jingyao came back. He was used to running in the morning every morning. He didn't go when Su Qingsang's morning sickness was the most serious. Recently, Su Qingsang became sleepy again, and she didn't have morning sickness anymore, so he resumed running in the morning. He was carrying the breakfast he had just bought in his hand. When he saw the sandwich on the table, he looked at Su Qingsang. Didn't I say that I would buy breakfast today? Why did you do it yourself? Don't you think it's too smoky? I'm just making a sandwich. How can there be smoky smoke? Su Qingsang never thought of herself as too delicate. Li Qianxue couldn't help but defend Su Qingsang. It's my fault. I thought I was going to make breakfast for Qingsang. I didn't expect that I would fail and have to let Qingsang clean up the aftermath. Mom? Su Qingsang interrupted her. Why am I the one who's cleaning up the aftermath? You're the one who gave me a chance to perform. Otherwise, I'll forget all my cooking skills next time. You. Li Qianxue didn't know if it was because they had talked it out, but she could really feel that Su Qingsang's tone was much more casual when talking to her. She was a little happy and a little emotional. No matter how unruly Su Qinghui was, her daughter was a good one. Then wouldn't the breakfast I bought be wasted? What's there to waste? Don't we still have you? After breakfast, because it was still a small long holiday, Su Qingsang suggested to Li Qianxue that they go shopping. Li Qianxue was also very interested. However, she looked at Su Qingsang's stomach worriedly. Are you okay? You really don't have to treat me like a doll. I'm in good health. As Su Qingsang spoke, she even made a fist gesture. Li Qianxue smiled. Wu Jinyao volunteered to be the driver. He took the mother and daughter out. This time, Su Qingsang wanted to buy a few maternity clothes. She was getting older and older. She could still wear sportswear now, but she wouldn't be able to wear it any later. Not only maternity clothes, but she also liked to go shopping in maternity shops. In the past, she didn't quite understand that kind of feeling. When she saw a baby, she only felt that it was very cute. Now, even when she saw a baby, she felt that it was cute. Does this look good? Su Qingsang held a light blue dress in her hand. Looking at the style, she felt that it was cute. It looks good. Li Qianxue fully affirmed her taste. Buy another set of pink. If it's a boy and a girl, it'll be a boy and a girl. What if it's 2 boys? Then buy 2 sets of each. Hu Jinyao was very generous. That way we'll have both boys and girls. This is good. And the one just now, I think we'll buy both. Li Qianxue nodded and suddenly approached Su Qingsang. You work in the hospital yourself. Is it possible for you to know in advance? It wasn't that she valued boys over girls. It was just that she was simply curious. Mom. Su Qingsang smiled. I'm a doctor. I can't break the rules, can I? I've told Jinyao that we won't go for that checkup. When the time comes, let nature take its course. Whether it's a boy or a girl, it's a gift from God. That's right. Hu Jiniao nodded. Whether it was a boy or a girl, he liked them all. Speaking of which, you can think of names for the children first. Li Qinxue suggested. Think of 4 names. 2 boys and 2 girls. You can also use them as backup. It's not my turn to do that. Yesterday, old Master Hua had said that he would personally name his 2 precious great-grandchildren. Of course. That was the reason. With their great-grandfather around, old Master Hua had to think of it first. In fact, Hu Jiniao and Su Qingsang had thought of many names during this period of time, but both of them felt that this was good and that was good. In the end, they simply ignored it and let old Master Hua worry about it. The 3 of them chatted and laughed for the whole morning. Now Su Qingsang would sleep for a while after eating. Therefore, after eating outside, Hu Jiniao rushed home with the 2 of them. Hu Jiniao had just parked the car and was about to get out to open the door for Su Qingsang and Li Qianxue. At this time, the security guard of the community behind him came out. Mr. Hua, you're back? A person came into the community and kept saying that he was a guest of your family. I asked him what kind of guest he was, but he didn't say and refused to leave. The security guards of the community were very responsible. Usually, people who came in and out would only be let in after asking. Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue had been here before, so the security guards knew them. However, the security guards didn't know the person who came today, and he looked very suspicious. Guest? Hu Jiniao raised his eyebrows and saw a man walk out of the apartment door. He looked to be in his 30s. He had a baby face. His facial features were put together, but he didn't look childish. He gave off the feeling that he was a little fresh meat. However, at this time, his slightly plump lips were curled into a smile, giving off the feeling that he was a ruffian. You are? Hu Jiniao was very sure that he didn't know this person at all. At the same time, Su Qingsang and Li Qianxue also got out of the car. The man wasn't Hu Jiniao at all. He directly ran in front of Li Qianxue. Qianxue, I'm here to look for you. Wei Ting. Li Qianxue was shocked when she saw the person. Her eyes were filled with unconcealable shock. Why are you here? No, how did you know I was here? The smile on the man named Wei Ting's face became brighter and brighter. He shook the phone in his palm. Qianxue, have you forgotten what I do? I located your phone yesterday. I flew all the way here to look for you this morning. How is it? Are you touched? What was there to be touched about? Li Qianxue only felt very awkward now. Wei Ting, who gave you the right to locate my phone? Did I agree to you locating my phone? Also, what do you want to do? Are you angry? Don't be angry. Wei Ting put away the smile on his face. It more or less gave people the feeling that he was a little frivolous and indecent. Seeing that Li Qianxue seemed to be really angry, he also put away the mischievous smile on his face. Don't you know how I located it? No matter what, I came back from Silicon Valley. How can such a small matter trouble me? As for what you said I wanted to do, you refused to see me before and you've been disappearing for the past few days. Then I can only come to look for you. You're looking for me? Why are you looking for me? To pursue you. Didn't I say that? I said that I like you and I want to pursue you. Su Qingsang, who had been watching all this time, felt that her eyeballs were about to fall out. When she was joking with Li Qianxue, she said that she would bless a handsome young man to pursue her properly. She didn't expect that her words would come true. A handsome young man really did come. Looking at this handsome young man, he was only a few years older than her. Could it be that Li Qianxue was going to find a young stepfather for her? Wei Ting, can you stop causing trouble? Li Qianxue was very embarrassed by his words. Her daughter and son were by her side now. What nonsense was this Wei Ting talking about here? How is it causing trouble? I'm serious. Wei Ting raised 3 fingers. Look, I even chased you all the way to Rong City for you. How can you say that I'm causing trouble? His gaze fell on Su Qingsang, who was at the side, and he said in a somewhat fawning manner, Hello, you're Qianshue's daughter, right? My name is Wei Ting. I'm your mother's suitor. No matter how knowledgeable Su Qingsang was, she was so shocked that her teeth almost fell out when she heard that her mother had a suitor. Hello, Mr. Wei. Su Qingsang forced herself not to reveal a look of surprise. She subconsciously glanced at Hu Jiniao. Wei Ting also looked at Hu Jiniao and took the initiative to extend his right hand. Hello, President Hua. I've heard of you. The Tianyu Group in Lin City is operating very well. President Hua is amazing. You're welcome. Hu Jiniao looked at the other party's outstretched hand, then looked at Li Qianxue, who was standing beside him with an awkward expression, and shook hands with him generously. The smile on Wei Ting's face became even more sincere because of Hu Jingyao and Su Qingsang's friendliness. If there's a chance, I hope to cooperate with your Chanyu group. If there's a chance. Hu Jingyao didn't say anything definite. The man in front of him was Li Qianshua's suitor, and he had chased after her to Rong City. He wasn't sure what would happen in the future. Since that was the case, he chose to observe first. Jingyao, Qingsang. It's really nice to meet you today. As Wei Ting spoke, he moved his body forward. I hope that you can help me put in a good word for me in front of Qianxue on account of my sincerity. As he spoke, he winked at Su Qingsang. Li Qianxue felt a headache coming on. She turned around and looked at the stunned security guard. I'm sorry, please help me take this person out. What? Wei Ting widened his eyes and looked at Li Qianxue. Qianxue, our two companies are working together. If you throw me out like this, how can our two companies continue to work together? If you want to talk about business, we'll talk about it when I return to Lin City. Now I can either ask you to leave, or I can ask the security guard to send you away. This is my private time. I don't want to use it to talk about business. Qianxue? Wei Ting waved away the approaching security guard. I came to look for you because I know that this is your private time. After all, every time I go to your company to look for you, you insist that you can't talk about anything other than business in the company. Now that I've finally found you, you say that this is private time and we can't talk about business? Well, let me ask you, when do you plan to have a good talk with me about the matter between us? Li Qianxue had a headache. She didn't know what was wrong with Wei Ting. Because the two companies were working together, after meeting him twice, Li Qianxue had more contact with him. However, even if there were more of these, it would only be communication between her and Wei Ting regarding the cooperation project and official matters. But some time ago, Wei Ting suddenly said that he liked her and wanted to pursue her. This was simply too ridiculous. Li Qianxue wouldn't believe it at all. In her opinion, Wei Ting was just bored and wanted to look for her as a pastime. He had the leisure, but she didn't want to cooperate. She was too busy carrying forward the Li Corporation. How could she have the time to care about these romantic affairs? It's impossible for me to be with you, and there's nothing to talk about. You can go. Don't do this next time. He chased her all the way to Rong City without even asking. In her opinion, it wasn't sincerity but harassment. Especially since he had even located her phone. This was simply intolerable. What's not possible? Why is it not possible? Wei Ting took a few steps forward and stood in front of Li Qianxue again. Why is it not possible? You haven't even talked to me and you already say that I can't do it. You should at least talk to me for a while before coming to a conclusion, right? I don't need to talk to you for a while. I can tell you now. Of course it's impossible for us. First, I'm divorced and according to your own words, you haven't even had a girlfriend. Second, as you can see, my daughter is pregnant, and I'm about to become a grandmother. And you're still so young. How do you think we can be together? It's a good thing that you want to be a grandmother. What does it have to do with me wanting to be with you? Li Qianxue had an inexplicable headache. She, who hadn't slept well to begin with, felt even more tired now. She didn't want to explain. It's not suitable. You can go. Chapter 639. Su Qinghui? Why is he here? How much did he hear? Li Qianxue subconsciously frowned, but she stood there without moving. Su Qinghui had booked a plane ticket back to Lin City in the afternoon. He knew that Li Qianxue wouldn't go back so soon. After thinking about it, he decided to visit Li Qianxue before he left. After what happened yesterday, he knew how much Li Qianxue hated him now. But he couldn't help but want to see her again. Even if he didn't say anything, just looking at her was good enough. However, Su Qinghui didn't expect that he would see such a scene. Li Qianxue actually had a new suitor, a suitor who was only a few years older than her daughter. In fact, over the years, there had been many men who had expressed their admiration for Li Qianxue in the business world. But at that time she was married. Now Li Qianxue had divorced him. For the first time, Su Qinghui realized that if Li Qianxue wanted to, it was very likely that she could end her single life at any time. This was not a good feeling. He had a feeling that Li Qianxue was getting further and further away from him, and it was getting harder and harder to catch up with her. The moment Li Qianxue saw Su Qinghui, Wei Ting also saw him. As Li Qianxue's suitor, of course, he had found out about Li Qianxue's situation. He had seen Su Qinghui before. As a tech upstart, even if he didn't know much about the upper-class society of Lin City before, if he really wanted to, there was nothing he couldn't ask. What's more, Li Qianxue had previously announced that she was cutting off her mother-daughter relationship with Su Peixian. Wei Ting could casually investigate and he would be able to find out. Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui had been married for more than 20 years. No matter what the process was, they were divorced. Wei Ting's footsteps moved in Li Qianxue's direction without a trace. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, he quickly stood next to Li Qianxue. Su Qingsang widened her eyes at the scene in front of her. She couldn't help but look at Hu Jinyao again. Hu Jinyao squeezed her hand and gestured for her to wait and see. Su Qinghui had come to see Li Qianxue, but now he didn't know what else to say. Li Qianxue's meaning was already very clear yesterday. No matter how much he said, it couldn't stop the two of them from drifting apart in the past 26 years. No, their hearts had never even been together. He looked at the young man who had boldly courted her. He was younger and braver than himself. He was able to chase her all the way to Rong City and openly express his feelings. In this regard, he was inferior to him. Su Qinghui had been very confident. He believed that as long as he persevered and made Li Qianxue understand his true feelings, sooner or later, she would be touched by him and forgive him. But now he was suddenly a little uncertain. Could it be that before he could ask Li Qianxue to forgive him, she had already been with someone else? During the Mid-Autumn Festival, the temperature in Rong City wasn't low at noon. Su Qingsang was pregnant. After standing for a while, she felt unbearably hot. "Dad, why are you here?" Since Li Qianxue didn't speak, she could only speak first. "I came to see you," Su Qinghui said, but his eyes fell on Li Qianxue. "I've booked a flight this afternoon. I came to see you before I left." "Is that so? Do you want to go up and sit for a while?" Su Qingsang wasn't helping Su Qinghui, but she didn't really like Wei Ting, the man who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. She didn't quite agree with Wei Ting's decision to locate Li Qianxue's phone. No. Su Qinghui clearly saw Li Qianxue's expression change because of Su Qingsang's words. She didn't welcome him, so why should he continue to stay? "I'm just here to see you. I'll leave after I see you." It wasn't that Li Qianxue didn't feel Wei Ting standing beside her. She resisted the urge to retreat to the side and let Wei Ting stand beside her. She saw the sadness in Su Qinghui's eyes, and she did feel a sense of pleasure. However, this kind of emotion came and went quickly. Since Su Qinghui had nothing to do with her anymore, why should she care about his feelings? Whether he was good or bad, it was none of her business. Although it seemed refreshing to use another man to make Su Qinghui suffer, she disdained it. So after Su Qinghui turned around, she took a step to the side. Wei Ting quickly turned around and stood in front of her. "Qianxue, did you just come back from shopping? Are you tired? Have you eaten? Why don't we go eat together?" The series of concerned questions made Su Qinghui stop in his tracks. Resisting the urge to turn around, he slowly walked out of the neighborhood. He needed time to think about what to do next. Li Qianxue took a big step back and pulled a meter away from Wei Ting. "Wei Ting, I've eaten. Sorry, you can go eat by yourself." She could have agreed to go eat with Wei Ting to deal a blow to Su Qinghui. However, she really disdained to do so. Wei Ting's face darkened. He looked at Li Qianxue with resentment. "Qianxue, I came all the way here to find you. You're not even willing to have a meal with me?" "I've eaten." "Then can you have dinner with me?" "Sorry, I have to accompany my daughter and son-in-law for dinner." "Then we can eat together." Wei Ting looked in the direction of Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao as he spoke. "I believe your daughter and son-in-law won't mind, right?" Su Qingsang frowned. When she met Li Qianxue's gaze, she shook her head rather rudely. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wei, but I mind." Wei Ting didn't expect Su Qingsang to be so rude. Su Qingsang didn't look at him at all. She only looked at Hu Jinyao and Li Qianxue. "Jinyao, Mom, let's go up. I'm so hot from the sun." "Qianxue." Wei Ting was anxious and walked in front of Li Qianxue. He had a pitiful look on his face. Unfortunately, Li Qianxue was unmoved. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wei. It's my private time now. Please leave." "I won't." Wei Ting was very persistent, and Li Qianxue didn't stand on ceremony with him. She waved her hand. The security guard, who had been waiting to watch the show, finally had something to do. He stepped forward to block Wei Ting, and he could only watch Li Qianxue and Su Qingsang leave. When they went upstairs, Su Qingsang asked Hu Jinyao to bring the things back to the room. She followed beside Li Qianxue, unable to hide the gossip on her face. "Mom, you and Mr. Wei?" Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang and was a little helpless. "Don't talk nonsense. I have nothing to do with him." "Really? But he said he wanted to chase you." "You'll believe him?" Li Qianxue was no longer an ignorant little girl. She wouldn't believe Wei Ting's words. "Maybe it's because I didn't treat him well the first time we worked together. I don't know why he made up his mind and insisted on pestering me. It means that you're infinitely charming, Mom. Su Qingsang's eyes were full of teasing. Alright, let's not talk about him. Anyway, I have no chance with him. Mom, actually, I think so. How could he be sincere? You can actually observe him before making a decision. Oh. Li Qianxue didn't have that intention at all. Even if she had that intention, it wouldn't be towards Wei Ting. Do you know how old he is this year? I'm nearly 20 years older than him. Tell me, what does he love about me? My mom is so good. No matter where she is, she deserves to be loved. Just coax me. Although Li Qianxue said that, she was in a good mood. As for Wei Ting, she really didn't think that there was any possibility between the two of them. In the following time, Li Qianxue continued to accompany Su Qingsang. When Su Qingsang went to work, Li Qianxue used the computer at home to deal with some business matters. When Su Qingsang didn't go to work and stayed at home, she tried her best to improve her relationship with her. A few times she even pulled Su Qingsang to sleep with her. However, when she went out with Su Qingsang, she would always run into Wei Ting. Rather than saying it was a chance encounter, it was more like an opportunity that he deliberately created. Li Qianxue didn't like Wei Ting and thought that it was impossible for her to be with him. However, she couldn't do it if she wanted to forcefully chase him away. After all, the two families still had a relationship. This caused her to not have a good face every time she saw Wei Ting, who appeared in front of her with a mischievous smile. However, Wei Ting seemed to have a grudge against her. The more she didn't give him a good face, the more he liked to stick to her. After these few days, Su Qingsang could more or less tell that it didn't seem like Wei Ting just wanted to play. However, all of this depended on Li Qianshue's own intentions. Su Qingsang didn't participate or give any opinions. She believed that Li Qianxue could handle these matters well. 10 days later, old Master Li returned to Lin City. Li Qianxue also decided to go back. Although Su Qingsang was very reluctant, she had no choice but to accept reality. At Rong City Airport, Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao sent Li Qianxue back to Lin City. Li Qianxue was also reluctant, but there were 2 contracts waiting for her to negotiate in Lin City. If she really wanted to relax, she could only wait for Su Yusin to graduate and come back to lighten her burden. Qingsang, you must take good care of yourself. I know. Su Qingsang nodded. Her eyes were a little hot. Mom, I don't want you to go. Silly girl. Li Qianxue blinked her eyes and suppressed the urge to cry. You're going to be a mother, so you can't be like a child anymore. You're pregnant now, so you're not like usual. Remember to take good care of yourself. I will. Besides, there's still Hu Jinyao. Mom, don't worry. I'll definitely take good care of Qingsang. If you don't take good care of her, I won't let you off. Li Qianxue glared at Hu Jinyao threateningly. When she looked at Su Qingsang again, she held her hand and was about to say a few more words when she saw Su Qingsang slowly approaching behind Hu Jinyao from the corner of her eye. Why was he here again? He was really haunting her. Li Qianshue's brows were tightly furrowed as she watched Wei Ting walk in front of her. Hi Qianxue, what a coincidence. After he finished joking with Li Qianxue, he greeted Su Qingsang and her husband. No matter what, he had to please his future daughter and son-in-law. His attitude was still very important. Li Qianxue didn't believe that there was such a coincidence. Wei Ting, did you locate my phone again? Qianxue, you've really wronged me. This time I really didn't locate your phone. He had only used his connections to check the airline's booking records. After all, he didn't believe that Li Qianxue would stay here forever. Since she had to go back sooner or later, she naturally needed to book a plane ticket. How smart was he? I just happened to be going back to Lin City. Look, aren't we fated? I don't think so. Li Qianxue wasn't a young girl who knew nothing. She was sure that Wei Ting must have done something. If you want to go back to Lin City, go ahead. I'm not going back. Then where are you going, Qianxue? Do I need to report to you where I'm going? Of course not. Wei Ting quickly waved his hand and looked at Li Qianxue with a fervent gaze. I just want to follow you wherever you go. You can treat me as one of your luggage. I don't have such a big luggage. Qianxue? Mr. Wei, please excuse me. I'm about to board the plane. It's okay, I'll go with you. Wei Ting fully displayed his experience that the thicker his skin was, the easier it was to chase after a girl. Li Qianshue's brows were tightly knitted. Who wants to go with you? I told you I'm not going back to Lin City. That's great. I can change my flight. Anyway, I'm going with you. We can just treat it as getting used to the trip in advance. After Wei Ting finished speaking, he added 4 words, honeymoon trip. Wei Ting. Li Qianxue was in a hurry to get rid of Wei Ting. She didn't even say goodbye to Su Qingsang and left. If you continue to talk nonsense, I won't be polite to you. The two of them disappeared at the boarding gate. Su Qingsang turned to look at Hu Jinyao, her eyes full of shock. Why did she feel that there was something wrong with this scene? Jinyao, what do you think of this Wei Ting? It's not easy to come to a conclusion for the time being. He looks good and there's nothing wrong with him in other aspects. Hu Jinyao told her about the information he had investigated. He's considered a tech upstart. In his early years when he was studying abroad, he developed a software with his friends. Then that game software was sold at a fairly good price. After that, he used this money as a startup capital and set up his own company with his friend. The cooperation with the Li Corporation this time was also because they installed an internal software on all the computers in your mother's company. That's how they got to know each other. Is that so? These were all work-related matters. What Su Qingsang cared about the most was how a man behaved in private, how he handled himself, and most importantly, how his relationship was. I haven't found any of this for the time being. Hu Jinyao didn't have much information about Wei Ting. It was just what he had just said. I only know that he didn't seem to have a girlfriend when he was in Silicon Valley. His friend said that he kept his chastity like jade and was quite clean. That good? This Wei Ting didn't look young, right? He hadn't had a girlfriend before? This didn't make sense. Yes. Hu Jinyao nodded. At least that's what the information says. Further ahead, it will take time to find out his identity and experience. If you're worried, I'll ask Yang Wenchang to tell you the results in 2 days. Su Qingsang shook her head. There's no hurry. There's no sign of anything happening now. Besides, I believe in my mother's taste. You believe in your mother's taste? Hu Jinyao raised his eyebrows, his eyes a little uncertain. Just based on her taste in your father? Hu Jinyao, Su Qingsang raised her hand to pinch Hu Jinyao's arm. Hu Jinyao wrapped her hand in his palm. All right, let's not worry about your mother's relationship for the time being. Wei Ting's words just now reminded me of something. What? We've been married for more than a year, but we haven't had a honeymoon together yet. Su Qingsang blinked. Don't tell me that you want to take me on a honeymoon now? Can't I? Su Qingsang looked down at her belly, which was a little bigger than 2 days ago. Now, at this time? Are you sure? Didn't you always say that you're in good health and that there's no problem at all? Hu Jinyao felt that this suggestion was feasible. If you're willing, I'll take you out to play for a few days. Where? Su Qingsang was really interested after hearing Hu Jinyao's words. Where do you want to go? Su Qingsang blinked. You don't want to go out, do you? Flying for a long time might cause a certain amount of damage to the fetus. If you want to play in the country, it's fine. It's best to choose the kind that doesn't take too long to drive. Su Qingsang was just saying it casually, but she didn't expect Hu Jinyao to really arrange it. When they came the next Saturday, Hu Jinyao brought her to his newly bought RV. The back of the RV was very spacious. It was very comfortable. Su Qingsang felt like she was sitting on a flat road. She retracted her gaze from the window and looked at Hu Jinyao. When did you buy this car? Don't tell me that you bought it specially to take me out to play? Can't I? His woman could never be too spoiled. Not to mention a car, even if she wanted a yacht or a plane, he could still satisfy her. It's a bit of a waste. Su Qingsang looked at the rather luxurious furnishings in the RV. I've really only seen this on TV. It's okay. If you like it, I'll buy 8 or 10 of them. Paint them in different colors. When the time comes, you can go to a place and drive one. It'll be like a rainbow. That's enough. If he continued to be like this, he would really spoil her. Su Qingsang yawned and looked at the bed in the RV. How long will it take? About 3 hours. You sleep for a while. I'll wake you up when we arrive. What about you? I'll watch over you. Su Qingsang smiled because of his words. She leaned over and kissed the corner of his lips. Then she went to the bed and lay down. She fell asleep. Hu Jinyao took out his notebook and began to deal with work. 3 hours later, Su Qingsang woke up after a good sleep. When she got up, she found Hu Jinyao sitting by the bed and looking at her. You're awake? We just arrived. We arrived. Su Qingsang sat up and looked out of the car window, but she found that she could see nothing but a white wall. Don't look. If you want to see, get out of the car. This is the parking lot. Su Qingsang nodded. Then wait for me. I'll change and tidy up. Okay. Hu Jinyao waited for Su Qingsang to get out of the car together. Only then did Su Qingsang realize that there was a 3-story villa in front of her. There were many kinds of flowers planted in the yard at the entrance, which looked quite beautiful and exquisite. She turned around and was about to talk to Hu Jingyao when she saw a car driving past on the road outside the villa. The open window allowed her to see the person sitting inside. Chapter 640. The car sped past in a flash. Su Qingsang looked at the familiar profile and subconsciously raised her foot to catch up with it. Before she could catch up, Hu Jingyao had already held her waist. "What's wrong? Slow down." "I think I saw a Mengwan." Su Qingsang looked at the silhouette of the car that sped away. She had a feeling that the side profile of the face sitting in the car belonged to Shi Mengwan. But shouldn't Shi Mengwan be in Lin City at this time? Moreover, she seemed to have seen another figure in the car. It looked like the back of a man. Shi Mengwan would be with a man? Shi Mengwan? Hu Jingyao glanced in the direction of the car. "You must be mistaken. By the way, you still haven't told me where we are." "Qingqing in the neighboring province." Su Qingsang nodded. She knew about Qingqing. It was next to the province where Rong City was located. It took about 3.5 hours to drive from Rong City. Qingqing had a deep cultural heritage and later on, it developed very well. It could be considered a city that was both ancient and modern in the east. It was a 3-hour drive from Rong City, but it was still in the south and north of Lin City. Shi Mengwan was video chatting with her 2 days ago. How could she be here? Maybe I'm seeing things. Su Qingsang decided to call Shi Mengwan later. Her decision to come here was also temporary, so Shi Mengwan still didn't know. Everything about leaving Lin City with Hu Jingyao and coming to Rong City was great, except for the fact that she had to be far away from her family and friends. It made her feel a little lonely. At the same time, behind the extended Bentley that had just left, Shi Mengwan looked at Zhang Haoze, who was on the phone. There wasn't much of a smile on her face. She turned her eyes away from him. The environment of this villa was especially good, and it was also close to the city. The name was even more pleasing to the ear. It was called Cherry Blossom Manor. The people who developed this place had planted a large patch of cherry blossoms according to the latitude and climate of this place. There were cherry blossoms on both sides of the road. When spring came, cherry blossoms would fall on both sides of the road. It was very beautiful. Unfortunately, Shi Mengwan came at the wrong time. It wasn't the season for cherry blossoms. She couldn't see the cherry blossoms, and even if she could, she wasn't in the mood to appreciate them. Zhang Haoze's voice was in her ear. She could guess who the person on the other end of the phone was. Qin Feifei, Zhang Haoze's fiancée. "I'm a little busy these few days. If there's anything, we'll talk about it when I get back." "Yes. Take care of your health. Don't think too much." Zhang Haoze's voice was clearer than other men's. At this time he was speaking to the person on the other end of the phone in a very gentle voice. Shi Mengwan's expression wasn't very good. When Zhang Haoze hung up the phone, she turned her gaze back. "If you're so afraid of her thinking too much, just bring her out directly. Why drag her along?" Shi Mengwan felt a little stuffy. The feeling of being unable to breathe was very uncomfortable. "Take me to the airport, I want to go back." Zhang Haoze's reaction was to hug her body, easily lifting her up and placing her on his lap. Shi Mengwan didn't have time to struggle. She just passively stuck to Zhang Haoze's body. The two of them had been entangled for nearly half a year. In his arms, she didn't have much spirit to resist. She was already used to his demands and his robbing behavior. But no matter how many habits she had, it couldn't overcome the fact that the man in front of her was someone else's fiancé. She didn't know what went wrong, and the situation in front of her made her very conflicted. She longed for everything about this man, his kiss, his embrace, his breath. But she resisted everything about him. He didn't admit that she was her dear brother. He even had a fiancé. Just like this time, she chased him away and told him that since he had a fiancé, he shouldn't come looking for her again. But what about him? He forcefully barged into her home and then invaded her residence. He even brought her to Qing City. However, the back of her waist was tightly held by him. Her body was brought into his arms. Very quickly, her lips were blocked by Zhang Haoze, and she couldn't say a word. She frowned slightly. She couldn't be more familiar with the facial features of the person in front of her. Even if she closed her eyes, she could still picture the other party's appearance in her heart. But this man didn't belong to her, at least. Her lips suddenly hurt. Her absent-mindedness made the man unhappy, and he bit her lips hard. When she came back to her senses, Zhang Haoze was staring at her face. His slightly narrow eyes had a gloominess that she couldn't understand. Before she could react, his hand had already reached for the hem of her clothes. The dark glass in the middle of the car had already risen. The driver in front couldn't see what they were doing behind. Sure, Mingwan didn't want him to succeed in such a place, so she held his hand with both hands. Jean Hausa. She suddenly called his name very seriously. Jean Hausa stopped what he was doing and looked at her silently. Are you going to be like this forever? While coaxing his fiancée, he imprisoned her, grasped her weakness and didn't let her leave. At this moment, her brows were filled with melancholy that couldn't be hidden. She was clearly such a beautiful person, but now her face was filled with melancholy. Tell me, Jean Hausa, are you going to be like this forever? He wanted to be like this, but she didn't want to continue. She had persisted until now, but she still couldn't make up her mind to leave Jean Hausa's side. She was just hoping that one day, Jean Hausa would remember that she was the little sister that he swore to love for the rest of his life. She waited for him to remember that he was the dear brother that she had made up her mind to always rely on. They used to depend on each other and they used to be inseparable. But she lost him, and when she found him he forgot who he was. That pair of eyes was too sad. Jean Hausa didn't want to look at her anymore. He raised his hand to cover her eyes, lowered his head and kissed her lips again. He couldn't see her eyes, but in the next moment he felt the wetness in his palm. Jean Hausa paused for a moment, but soon he deepened his plunder. Su Qing-sang stretched and looked at the cherry blossom avenue in front of her with a hint of regret in her eyes. If only we had come in April. We would have been able to see the cherry blossoms on both sides, right? Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded and put his arm around her waist. If you like it, we'll come again next April. This villa was one of the best in the area, and there were 2 more villas inside. Those 2 villas took up the largest area. They were booked as soon as they came out, and this villa had the best location. Because not only could they see the cherry blossom avenue in front of them, but they could also see the largest inland lake in the city behind them. He had built a garden on the side of the lake. Sitting behind it, they could enjoy the lake breeze while enjoying the beautiful scenery. We'll talk about it later. Su Qing-sang had slept for a long time in the car, so she wasn't sleepy at all. Let's go out for a walk. Okay. Another advantage of this place was that the environment was very good, and the neighborhood was very large. Su Qing-sang and Hua Jinyao held hands and walked along the lake. They saw another villa. That villa was bigger than the one they were living in now. Is that villa also in this neighborhood? Hua Jinyao nodded. Looking at the villa, he suddenly remembered something. If he remembered correctly, the person who bought this villa seemed to have the surname Jean? The Jean family was one of the old aristocratic families in Qing City. Thinking of the Jean family, he thought of the few times he had met Jean Hausa in Lin City. If he remembered correctly, the Jean family's various forces had been surging and hadn't stopped. Was this area developed by your company? Su Qing-sang's words brought Hua Jinyao back to his senses. He smiled and held her hand as they walked down the stairs. Not only this cherry blossom manor, but the shopping mall outside and the neighborhood beside the shopping mall were all built by Tianyu Group. At first they wanted to build a villa area here. After all, the scenery here was good and the feng shui was good. After the villa area was built, they discovered that the nearby space was empty. At that time, the Qing city government was attracting investment, and Tianyu Group had the ability to do so, so they simply circled the land and became the current scale. Amazing. Hearing this, Hua Jinyao moved his face closer to Su Qing-sang. Your husband is so amazing. Don't you want to give me some reward? With a bow sound, Su Qing-sang leaned over and kissed his face. My husband is the best. Is that okay? So. The kiss wasn't sincere enough, but since he knew that Su Qing-sang wasn't a very open person outside, he let her go. Looking at a rocking chair in a pavilion in front of them, he led Su Qing-sang to sit down. The autumn wind was cool, and this season gave people a rather comfortable feeling. This area was built by Tianyu Group. What about Lin City? Su Qing-sang had forgotten to ask about this. Why did you go to Lin City back then? Also, why were you in the hospital that day? Li Junxing received a transfer order to be the mayor of Lin City. He told me that this was an opportunity. However, our company had originally planned to open a branch in Lin City. There were a few projects that had already been set to start at that time. As for why I appeared in the hospital that day, when I went to inspect the construction site, a worker happened to have acute appendicitis. That day Yang Wenchang drove my car for maintenance. I sent that person to the hospital myself. Unexpectedly, because he wasn't very familiar with the hospital, Hua Jinyao, who was about to leave after paying the fee, settling the worker down and calling his family members, went in the wrong direction. So that's how it is? Su Qing-sang thought about it and found it a little unbelievable. In that case, I have to thank that worker in your company. If he hadn't suddenly had acute appendicitis, we wouldn't have had the chance to meet, right? Not bad. Hu Jingyao nodded. Su Qingsang smiled and leaned her face against his chest. It's so comfortable here. Yes. If you like it, we can come a few more times next time. Okay. Su Qingsang nodded. She really liked it here. Closing her eyes, she could smell the osmanthus flowers in the air. Are osmanthus flowers planted here? Yes. There are a few osmanthus trees in front. I'll take you to see them later. Okay. Su Qingsang found that Hu Jinyao's choice of place was very satisfactory. She was pregnant now and a little lazy. She didn't want to go to places that were too torturous or too tiring. Later, let's go eat Qing City's specialty dishes. I know a restaurant here that makes very authentic roast whole sheep. Okay. Su Qingsang's appetite had been good recently and she wasn't too picky. In fact, many things weren't as exaggerated as they sounded. She couldn't eat this or that. She had to pay attention to the amount and the actual condition of her body. Not being picky was also a kind of prenatal education. Su Qingsang had never been to Qing City before. The place that Hu Jingyao mentioned was in a courtyard near the suburbs. The courtyard was a standard northern courtyard house. It was spacious and grand with northern trees planted. It looked just like an ordinary courtyard house. Su Qingsang followed Hu Jingyao into the room in the middle of the courtyard. The inside was completely different from the outside. The decoration was very elegant. There weren't many tables in the hall, and the corridors on both sides could lead to private rooms. Judging from the number of rooms, there didn't seem to be many. How do you know about this place? This boss used to work with Tianyu. Later, because he always had to socialize outside, his body couldn't take it, so he didn't open a company and came to open this farmhouse. There's a limited number of guests every day. If there's more than that, he won't take any guests. As Hu Jingyao spoke, a slightly chubby middle-aged man walked out of one of the private rooms. When he saw the two of them, he quickly stepped forward and extended his hand to Hu Jingyao. President Hua, how rare. You actually have time to come here. I brought my wife here to eat roast whole sheep. Hu Jingyao smiled and shook hands with the other party. How is it? Is there a seat? President Hua, you're here. Even if there's no seat, I'll add it for you. The man smiled like a flower. This way, please. The sky room. Thank you. Hu Jingyao followed behind the boss, while Su Qingsang looked around. She rarely saw such a courtyard house in Lin City. It was still different from the courtyard houses in the imperial capital. After entering the sky room, Hu Jingyao asked the boss to serve the roast whole sheep. While waiting for the dishes to be served, Su Qingsang looked at the courtyard at the back. The roast whole sheep is roasted in the back? Yes. Directly roasted? Yes. Do you want to see it? Su Qingsang really wanted to see it. She nodded and Hu Jingyao led her out. After leaving the private room, a waiter served the dishes to a private room in front. The moment the waiter entered the door, Su Qingsang and Hu Jingyao happened to walk inside. She saw that the person who came out of the room was very familiar. It was Zhang Haoze. She was stunned for a moment. Zhang Haoze was very tall. He was about the same height as Hu Jingyao, so she couldn't see inside the private room. However, the moment Zhang Haoze came out and the door closed, she seemed to see a woman sitting inside. President Hua? Zhang Haoze greeted Hu Jingyao first when he saw him. Hu Jingyao nodded. He wasn't surprised that Zhang Haoze was here. Qingqing was the Zhang family's Huiyangxiu. It was normal for Zhang Haoze to be here. President Zhang is also here to eat roast whole sheep? Yes. Zhang Haoze nodded and looked at Su Qingsang. He nodded slightly. Hello, Mrs. Hua. Su Qingsang's expression was a little cold. Speaking of which, Zhang Haoze had helped her before. She should thank him. However, when she thought about how this man was Shi Mengwan's big brother, and how he had forgotten about Shi Mengwan and was with another woman, she felt a little uncomfortable. President Zhang, is that Miss Chen inside? Su Qingsang remembered that the woman beside Zhang Haoze had the surname Chen. She was just asking casually. Before Zhang Haoze could say anything, Hu Jingyao cooperated with Su Qingsang and spoke. Speaking of which, our company has worked with the Chen family before. If it's Miss Chen, why don't we go together? No. Zhang Haoze's expression didn't look too good. President Hua, it's not convenient for me right now. If there's a chance next time, I'll visit you again. President Zhang, you're too polite. Hu Jingyao and Su Qingsang could tell that the person inside wasn't Chen Feifei. Su Qingsang's expression didn't look too good either. Seeing Zhang Haoze walk to the other side, she glared at his back. What's wrong? Why are you unhappy? Hu Jingyao didn't quite understand Su Qingsang's thoughts. He looked in Zhang Hao's direction and asked, "Did he offend you?" "Yes." "How did he offend you? Tell me, I'll help you vent your anger." "Forget it." Su Qingsang shook her head. Zhang Hao had forgotten about Shi Mengwan and was with Chen Feifei. Now he was here with another woman. Don't tell her that it was nothing. She could tell from Zhang Hao's expression just now. There must be something fishy going on. She felt a little upset. Poor Shi Mengwan had rejected countless suitors for such a man for so many years. She was still single. But what about Zhang Hao? He was hugging women here and had no idea who Shi Mengwan was. Although feelings were one-sided, she had to be allowed to stand up for her friend, right? However, there was no need to tell Hu Jingyao about these thoughts now. Looking at the closed door of the private room, the waiter still hadn't come out to serve the dishes. She held Hu Jinyao's hand and said, "Didn't you say you wanted to see the whole roast lamb? Let's go." She left with Hu Jinyao and the door of the private room opened. The waiter came out from inside and the person standing behind the door was Shi Mengwan, who was careful not to be seen. She placed one hand on her chest to suppress her heart, which was about to jump out. She took a deep breath and leaned her body against the wall. Suddenly, a wave of sadness welled up in her heart. Did such a shameful relationship really have to continue? Su Qingsang didn't know what she had missed. After watching the live performance of the whole roast lamb for a while, she couldn't stand it anymore. The temperature was too high and she was especially afraid of heat now. She didn't run into Zhang Hao again when she returned to the private room. By the time she finished eating with Hu Jinyao, the waiter had already started to clean up the private room. Zhang Hao had already left. After returning to the Cherry Blossom Manor, she sent a video request to Shi Mengwan while Hu Jinyao went to take a shower. However, she was rejected. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment before she thought of sending it again. Shi Mengwan had already taken the initiative to call. "Qingsang. Mengwan, is it not convenient for you now?" "Yes, a guest came over. She's going to look at clothes now. I'm going to measure her later." "There's still a guest at such a late hour? This person is too insensible. Doesn't she know that you need to rest?" Su Qingsang's tone was filled with heartache. Shi Mengwan didn't reply. She was just saying it. It wasn't that she didn't know Shi Mengwan's workaholic personality. "It's okay. I'm used to it. How have you been?" "I'm fine. Now the child is making trouble for me. He could even eat now. By the way, guess where I am now?" "Where are you?" Shi Mengwan already knew, so her tone wasn't surprised. "I'm in Qing City. You didn't expect it, did you?" Su Qingsang didn't hear anything wrong in Shi Mengwan's voice. After all, she couldn't see the other party's expression through the phone. "Wu Jinyao took me to eat roast whole lamb tonight. Tasted really good. Mengwan, come over next time. Let's do it again." "Okay." Shi Mengwan nodded and looked at the man who had just come out of the bathroom. "Why did you think of coming to Qing City?" Su Qingsang noticed that Shi Mengwan used the word come, but she didn't think in that direction. "Wu Jinyao said that my mother left. He was afraid that I would be bored at home, so he took me out for a walk. He said it was like a honeymoon." "That's great." Shi Mengwan smiled, her eyes filled with pure envy. How many people in the world could be as lucky as Su Qingsang? She met a man who liked her, doted on her, protected her, and held her in the palm of his hand? "Mengwan." Su Qingsang suddenly changed the topic, and her tone became serious. "Yes. Well?" Su Qingsang wasn't good at this kind of thing, but thinking of Zhang Hao's reaction today, she was really worried for her good friend. You still think about your dear brother? Don't you think about other men?" On the other end, Zhang Hao had already walked behind Shi Mengwan. Her heart skipped a beat, and she forced her voice to remain calm. "Why are you talking about this?" Su Qingsang rarely mentioned this in front of her. This was a rare tacit understanding between the two sisters. "I just think that you should try to let it go. After all, the beautiful relationship in your heart as a childhood sweetheart might have long been forgotten by the other party. Moreover, so much time has passed. The person from back then might not be the person from back then. Haven't you ever thought about it? Perhaps, what you're stubbornly pursuing is just an unwillingness in your heart. Or a fantasy. In fact, that man might already be married. He might even have a child. Or perhaps he is lacking in other aspects." "Qingsang? Mengwan, listen to me. I know what you're thinking and I've always respected your determination to wait. But I feel that whether it's waiting or looking forward to it, it should be placed on someone who's worth it. For those who can't bear to part with it, there's really no need to waste your feelings. That would only increase your pain and emptiness." In silence, Shi Mengwan's body was pulled into Zhang Hao's arms. She almost threw the phone in her palm. Mengwan. Qing Sang stopped talking. I know everything. Everyone understood the logic, but it was too difficult to do it. Especially, Zhang Hao's hands had already reached into her collar. His lips, with a slight warmth, landed on the back of her neck. Shi Mingwan trembled and couldn't help but take a step forward, but she couldn't get rid of Zhang Hao's hands. He brought her back into his arms. She couldn't help but let out a soft cry. Mingwan, what's wrong? I'm fine. You're not angry, are you? Don't be angry. I really just think that it's not a good idea for you to wait endlessly like this. Chapter 641. Su Qingsang didn't want to interfere with Shi Mingwan's feelings, but she really felt that Zhang Hao wasn't worth Shi Mingwan waiting for. Let's not talk about the fact that he brought a woman out to eat alone today, which might not be a big deal. However, it was a fact that Zhang Hao and Qin Feifei were engaged. On the way back today, she also asked Hu Jingyao about it, and he briefly told her some things. The Zhang family situation was even more complicated than the Hua families. The Hua family still had old Master Hua, although Hua Mingmei and Hua Mingliang had their own ideas. However, whether it was old Master Hua or Hua Mingguang, they could suppress them. The company was divided into different departments, and everyone had their own things to do. Hu Jingyao alone could suppress those people. But the Zhang family's current situation was very complicated. Not to mention that Zhang Hao didn't have that kind of feelings for Shi Mingwan. He had completely forgotten about Shi Mingwan. Even if he hadn't forgotten, if he really got together with Shi Mingwan's life wouldn't be too good. Thinking of this, Su Qingsang became more and more worried. Mingwan, for some people, the environment is too complicated, and the experience of growing up is also very complicated. If you continue like this, I think it will be very hard for you. Shi Mingwan was still so young. There was no need for her to waste her time on Zhang Hao. It wasn't like she wasn't wanted. There had been too many people pursuing her over the years. Not to mention others, Hu Jinyao's childhood friend Wan Xianyang was also not bad. The important thing was for her to learn to let go of the past, accept other men and welcome a new life. Silence. Just as Shi Mingwan was about to speak, Zhang Hao's arms were already around her waist. She took a deep breath and forced herself not to reveal any flaws. I got it. Thank you, Qingsang. Why are you being so polite with me? Su Qingsang really wanted Shi Mingwan to be happy. Mingwan find a good, right man? You deserve it. Shi Mingwan didn't say anything. Her hands became more and more unruly. She had to quickly end the conversation with Su Qingsang. My guest is here. I have to go. All right. Come to Rong City when you have time. I missed you so much. In the past, Su Qingsang had a cold personality and kept her distance from everyone. She was only close to Shi Mingwan. Okay. Shi Mingwan's voice disappeared in the beeping sound of the phone. Her clothes had been pushed up to her chest. Her body was turned around, but she didn't hug his neck like she used to. Instead, she put her hands on his chest, and her expression showed resistance. Zhang Hao stopped and stared at her face. Angry? Shi Mingwan looked at Zhang Hao and felt depressed. She was a little angry not at him but at herself. Ever since she was 12 years old, she had been looking forward to reuniting with her dear brother because of the warmth of their youth. She understood what Su Qingsang said. But understanding was one thing, doing it was another. This man had become her obsession. She couldn't let him go and she couldn't let him go. If she could get away, she would have asked herself to leave when she found out that Qin Feifei was beside Zhang Hao. Realizing that she was actually distracted again, Zhang Hao bit her lips again. Shi Mingwan was in pain and suddenly pushed him away. Zhang Hao. She really couldn't go on like this. Shi Mingwan turned her face away and didn't look at him. I want to go back to Lin City. Okay. Zhang Hao nodded. His rare attitude stunned her for a moment. After a few days I'll go back with you. I want to go back now. Su Qingsang came to Qing City, and she didn't want to meet Su Qingsang. Zhang Hao narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Shi Mingwan. He suddenly went forward and picked her up. Before she could react, he carried her to the direction of the bed. Shi Mingwan didn't manage to leave in the end. When she woke up in the morning, Zhang Hao had already left. He had been especially busy in Lin City, and it was even more so after coming to Qing City. In Lin City, when he was very busy, she still had her own things to do, such as going to the studio and drawing. But when she came here and stayed in this big villa, she felt like a bird with broken wings. After getting up, she wasn't in a hurry to go downstairs for breakfast. Shi Mingwan casually put on a coat and went to the balcony. From here she could see the lake at the back. The scenery was quite good. Not long after she sat down on the sofa, she actually saw Su Qingsang. Shi Mingwan was shocked. She wanted to stand up without thinking, but she felt that her movements were too big. She was on the second floor now. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao were walking by the lake in the distance. When she saw the two of them walking in this direction, she was so shocked that she quickly got up and entered the room. She drew the curtains and stood by the curtains to look downstairs. Su Qingsang had already shown signs of pregnancy, and her lower abdomen was slightly bulging. She was wearing a pregnant dress, and her face was filled with a warm and satisfied smile. Hu Jinyao walked beside her, and the two of them whispered to each other from time to time. She was thinking too much. Su Qingsang wouldn't notice this side at all, much less discover her. The smile on Su Qingsang's face made Shi Mingwan envious. Her hand holding Hu Jinyao's made her yearn even more. She and Zhang Haoze couldn't even appear in front of everyone. He had a fiancée. No matter when, the woman standing in front of him wouldn't be her. Shi Mingwan's mood fell to the bottom of the valley. She couldn't recover from that strange feeling. Her body was hugged by someone. Zhang Haoze was actually at home today. He followed her gaze and looked out of the window. Do you want to go down and say hello? His warm breath brushed against her neck. She shrank her neck and wanted to escape from his control. However, her body was turned around and pressed against the glass of the sliding door of the balcony. Zhang Haoze. Don't you need to? No matter what, you're good friends and best friends. Shouldn't it be right to say hello? Zhang Haoze. She called his name softly and her voice was pleading. Don't do this. She absolutely didn't want Su Qingsang to see this side of her. Don't what? He narrowed his eyes and asked her in a low voice. She was only wearing a coat outside and he easily took it off. She was still wearing yesterday's nightdress, and the thin fabric was easily torn to pieces by him. She could hear his breathing beside her ears. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao were downstairs. She felt extremely ashamed. She bit her lip desperately, but she couldn't resist Zhang Haoze's domineering attitude. As her body was pushed away by him, a tear fell from the corner of her eye. For the first time, she seriously realized in her heart that the man in front of her was really not the big brother in her impression. Su Qingsang had no idea that in the villa not far in front of them, her good friend was also there. The weather in Qing City had been good these few days. The environment here was good. Walking in it made people feel relaxed and happy. Of course, the most important thing was that Hu Jinyao was by her side. She had been pregnant for 4 months. Her belly was a little bigger than that of an average pregnant woman who was 4 months pregnant. After all, they were twins, so they were always different. Walking to the osmanthus tree in front of her, Su Qingsang sat down on the rocking chair. The sun in this season didn't shine much, and it gave people a very comfortable feeling. Are you taking a walk in your own neighborhood when you go on a trip? Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang's expression of enjoyment and couldn't help but laugh. She was really too easily satisfied, wasn't she? Can't I? The environment here is quite good. I think staying here is quite comfortable. I was going to take you to Luoshan Park in Qing City today. Why don't we go in the afternoon? I'll go later. Su Qingsang blinked. I just want to sit under this osmanthus tree for a while and enjoy the wind. Enjoy this peace. Okay. If you want to enjoy peace, I'll accompany you. Hu Jinyao nodded. He was going to accompany Su Qingsang, so of course she could do whatever she wanted. Su Qingsang smiled. The so-called trip didn't necessarily mean going somewhere and seeing the scenery there. It was also good to change places, slow down, and enjoy this kind of leisure time without doing anything. She raised her hand and was about to stretch, but when her hand was halfway raised, it suddenly froze. She blinked as if she was a little frightened. What's wrong? Ever since Su Qingsang was pregnant, her every reaction made Hu Jinyao nervous. He looked at Su Qingsang nervously, afraid that she was uncomfortable again. He's moving. This time it was Hu Jinyao's turn to be stunned. Oh, him. Su Qingsang was a doctor. Of course, she knew that the fetus would move after 4 months of pregnancy. But this was the first time she felt it, and that feeling was particularly magical. Su Qingsang looked at her abdomen, retracted her hand and gently placed it on it. He moved again. Hu Jinyao looked at her and couldn't help but reach out and place his hand on it. He was extremely nervous and stared at his palm with a sacred expression. However, after waiting for a long time, there was no more movement. Why isn't he moving? I don't know. Su Qingsang smiled and deliberately teased him. Maybe it's because you didn't greet him? Was that so? Hu Jinyao frowned slightly. He cleared his throat, and his face suddenly looked a little nervous. Hello. I'm Dad. His serious expression made Su Qingsang laugh. She didn't have time to laugh. The sudden movement in her abdomen stunned Hu Jinyao. He really moved. Silly. Su Qingsang smiled and placed her hand on Hu Jinyao's palm. Feeling the fetal movement in her abdomen from time to time, her expression softened. When the fetal movement stopped, Hu Jinyao retracted his hand and held Su Qingsang's hand instead. Qingsang? Yes. Although Grandpa has to think of the children's names, I thought of 2 nicknames for the 2 children. What? It's called Xiang Xiang and Yen Yen. Whether it's a boy or a girl, these 2 nicknames will be called. Su Qingsang looked at his expression and nodded gently. Okay, very good names. Thank you. She understood what he meant. Hu Jinyao was grateful and leaned over to kiss her abdomen. Su Qingsang's heart softened. Looking at Hu Jinyao's head, she couldn't help but hug him into her arms. I think they will know. Hu Jinkai Hu Wushuang. His brother and sister would know that he missed them so much, and they would understand his immature behavior and the choice he had to make at such a young age. Hu Jinyao didn't say anything. He just hugged Su Qingsang's waist tightly and enjoyed the rare silence. Mount Luo Park in Qing City was built according to Mount Luo, but Mount Luo wasn't a mountain. In ancient times there was a person named Mount Luo. He was talented, but he once failed the exam 10 times in a row. Later, Mount Luo simply stopped taking the exam. Every day he only invited a group of scholars to talk about poetry near his residence. He was hospitable and attracted many scholars. With more people the place became smaller. At that time, there was a minister who liked the literary talent of Mount Luo. He had purposely built this garden. Later, after Qing City began to develop, this place became a scenic spot. It was renamed Mount Luo Park. This was a northern garden with great research value, so almost everyone who came to Qing City would come to Mount Luo Park to play. Su Qingsang had seen many gardens in Jiangnan, but she had rarely seen a garden with such a northern style. This was the first time. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao entered Mount Luo Park together. Because it wasn't a weekend, there weren't many people here. There was a maple forest in Mount Luo. The maple leaves would only turn red in about half a month. At that time there would be a lot of tourists. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao walked hand in hand on the bluestone path. The environment here is really good. Of course it's good. Hu Jinyao introduced it to Su Qingsang in a low voice. Qing City has many very famous scenic spots. This was once a large trade transit city in the north, so there were many merchants coming and going. There are also a few antique ancient cities here. Although they have been developed in the past few years, they are not very famous. We can slowly walk through them in a few days. Okay. If you can't take it, just tell me. We'll stop and rest. Su Qingsang was pregnant, so she couldn't be too tired. If she had the energy, she would play a little longer. If she didn't, she would go home and rest. Don't worry. You really don't have to worry about me. I'm not a porcelain doll. How can I be so fragile? Even if you're a strong woman in my heart, you're just my wife. He squeezed her hand slightly. A wife who needs my protection. Su Qingsang smiled and leaned over to kiss him on the cheek. Mount Luo Park was very big. Su Qingsang finally wasn't like usual. By evening she was already a little overwhelmed. Hu Jinyao had been paying attention to Su Qingsang's expression. Seeing her like this, he immediately stopped her from leaving. Let's go back. If you want to come, we'll come again tomorrow. It was rare for Su Qingsang not to be willful. She nodded and left with Hu Jinyao. She originally wanted to go home directly, but after getting into the car, Su Qingsang suddenly wanted to eat hot pot. I don't come here often, but I know there's a hot pot restaurant in the ancient city that's been open for a long time. The taste is good. Let's go there to eat. Ancient city? Is that the one you mentioned just now? Yes, there's a night market inside. After dinner, if you've recovered your energy, you can go shopping. Then I'm going. Su Qingsang liked these old places. She was in high spirits and felt that the fatigue in her body had lessened a lot. Hu Jinyao smiled. The driver drove the car in the direction of the ancient city. Mount Luo Park wasn't too far from the ancient city. They arrived in half an hour. They booked a private room. Su Qingsang was really tired after walking for half a day. After ordering a lot of dishes, she only cared about enjoying the food to her heart's content. She was in charge of eating and Hu Jinyao was in charge of cooking for her. On the contrary, he didn't eat much. This was a new hobby that Hu Jinyao had developed ever since Su Qingsang became pregnant. He especially liked to feed Su Qingsang and hoped that she could eat more. I'm so full. Su Qing was full. She looked at the remaining half of the ingredients and looked at Hu Jinyao. It's a little wasteful. It's not a waste. There's still me. Hu Jinyao didn't mind at all. He put the remaining ingredients into the pot and finished them. Su Qing supported her chin with one hand and watched him eat with a faint smile in her eyes. Don't we look like an old married couple? No. Hu Jinyao gave a negative answer without thinking. We're not old at all now. So if you want to be an old married couple, wait until you're a little older. Su Qing loved to hear his sweet words. The smile on her face became even brighter. After leaving the hot pot restaurant, they turned to the side and arrived at the ancient city. It was even more lively at night than during the day. Su Qing and Hu Jinyao entered the ancient city. The small shops on both sides were very unique. However, such places seemed to be the same in ancient cities all over the country. Su Qing would stop to take a look when she encountered something interesting. If she didn't encounter it, she wouldn't look. There was a shop in front. The owner sold her own cloth and clothes. She set up a loom in the shop. It was the kind of old floral cloth and old-fashioned cotton cloth. Su Qing was very interested in this. Not only was there old floral cloth, but there were also ethnic clothes made of such cloth. There were also other fabrics, all of which had local ethnic characteristics. Su Qing liked the ethnic clothes that the other party had placed at the door very much. She was even more interested when she saw the loom in the shop. She entered the door with Hu Jinyao. A middle-aged woman was sitting in front of the loom, weaving. There were also a few shop assistants. When they saw someone enter, they stood up and greeted them. The moment Su Qing looked up, she realized that Zhang Haoze was also here. She was a little surprised. Qing City was a big city with a population of more than 10 million. It wasn't easy for her to bump into him 2 days in a row. President Hua. When Zhang Haoze saw Hu Jinyao, surprise flashed across his eyes. His subordinates had clearly told him that Hu Jinyao and his wife had gone to Luoshan Park today. Why were they here? President Zhang, what a coincidence. Hu Jinyao felt the same as Su Qing. He felt that it was too much of a coincidence. How could they bump into each other everywhere they went? He looked at Zhang Haoze's side. There didn't seem to be anyone else. President Zhang is alone? No. Seeing that the two of them knew each other, the shop assistant who had just come up to greet the two of them immediately became interested. This gentleman is here with his girlfriend. His girlfriend is very beautiful. She just picked out a set of clothes to try on. This beauty has such a good figure. Why don't you pick 2 sets to try on? Su Qing noticed that when the shop assistant said the word girlfriend, Zhang Haoze's expression was calm, as if he didn't feel uncomfortable at all. She had just persuaded Shi Mengwan yesterday, and today she met Zhang Haoze again. Moreover, she met him shopping with a woman. The scenery of the ancient city was indeed good, but she didn't think that based on her impression of Qin Feifei from the 2 times she met her last time, she would come here to shop. If it weren't for the fact that she didn't want to be nosy, she really wanted to see who Zhang Haoze's girlfriend was. What kind of stunning woman could make Zhang Haoze leave a rich young lady like Qin Feifei behind and come to accompany another woman? Beauty, what do you think of this set? The shop assistant brought over 2 sets of ethnic clothes, her face full of encouragement. These are all designed and made by our shop ourselves. We're the only shop in the entire Qing City. We've all applied for copyrights. Beauty, you're so beautiful. Why don't you try it on? Okay. Su Qing didn't refuse. Although she was pregnant now, this set of clothes was loose, so she should be able to wear it. Most importantly, she had a good friend who was a fashion designer. These ethnic clothes with characteristics and personality were all Shi Mengwan's favorite. She could buy a few sets and send them back to Lin City for Shi Mengwan. Su Qing took the clothes and was about to walk towards the fitting room, but the shop assistant signaled her to wait. At this time, another shop assistant had already walked to the door of the fitting room. The 2 beauties inside, have you tried on the clothes? I just came in. I'm not done yet. There was a response from one of the rooms, but the other was silent. The shop assistant couldn't help but glance at Zhang Haoze. Because there were many people coming and going in a shop like theirs, when there was a lot of traffic, many people would take it away without trying it on, so there were only 2 fitting rooms. The gentleman's girlfriend had been in for a long time, but she didn't answer. Sir, your girlfriend has been in for a long time. Why isn't there any movement? Zhang Haoze glanced at the shop assistant, then at Su Qing. His expression didn't look too good. My girlfriend takes a long time to change. Is there a problem? No problem, no problem. Zhang Haoze's gloomy expression made the shop assistant a little scared. She didn't dare to rush him anymore. Su Qing smiled and didn't mind. It's okay. I'll wait a while. As she spoke, she looked at Jean Hauser. President Jean, there's no need to be in a hurry. We're just here to stroll around. There's no hurry. Hua Jinyao stood at the side and narrowed his eyes at Jean Hauser. His sharp intuition told him that there seemed to be something wrong with Jean Hauser today. He took a step forward and stood in front of Su Qingsang, looking at Jean Hauser. Speaking of which, it's really fate that we can meet President Jean twice in 2 days. However, I'm surprised that President Jean has the time to come to a place like the ancient city to play. If I remember correctly, President Jean should have a lot of work to do now, right? You're welcome. Business is endless. Just like President Hua, didn't you also put aside your work to accompany your wife out to play? Indeed. Wu Jinyao smiled. Then, can I look forward to the good news from President Jean? I think President Jean won't mind buying me a drink when the good news comes, right? Of course. Jean Hauser's expression didn't change and his face was full of calmness. The shop assistant looked at the two of them and couldn't help but ask Su Qingsang if she still wanted to try on the clothes. Chapter 642. Wu Jinyao and Su Qingsang both looked at Jean Hauser. Jean Hauser's expression was rather calm. My girlfriend isn't feeling well today. I'll go and take a look. Excuse me. Go ahead. Hua Jinyao looked at Jean Hauser meaningfully. The shop assistant didn't stop him. Jean Hauser glanced at Su Qingsang and entered the fitting room. Su Qingsang felt that Jean Hauser's reaction was a little strange today, but she didn't know him well, so she didn't know if he had always been like this, or if he was acting like this when he saw them. At the same time, a customer from another room came out. Su Qingsang picked up the clothes, glanced at Hua Jinyao, smiled at him and went in to try on the clothes. Hua Jinyao gave her a doting look. He signaled her to hurry and change. He was also looking forward to seeing her in such a national costume. In another fitting room that was separated by a wall, Shi Mingwan had already put on the national costume. But she leaned against the wall and didn't have the courage to walk out. She never thought that because she was in a bad mood she would be dragged out to the night market in the ancient city by Jean Hauser and meet Su Qingsang. It was such a coincidence that they entered the same store. Yes, she was a fashion designer and Su Qingsang was her best friend. The two of them were very similar in some aspects. For example, what they liked to eat and where they liked to go. Including their favorite style of clothing. She was a fashion designer and this kind of store could give her the most inspiration. Similarly, if Su Qingsang, who was in Qing City, passed by such a shop, she would definitely come in and take a look. She didn't hear Su Qingsang's voice until she finished changing. She had planned to go out so she had to stay in the fitting room. When she heard that Jean Hauser wanted to come and take a look, her heart was in her throat. But when Jean Hauser knocked on the door she had to open the door and let him in. Her body was almost completely hidden behind the door, and the narrow door couldn't hide her at all. She looked at the wall. Even though she knew that Su Qingsang was in the fitting room next door, she was afraid that Hua Jinyao would see her. When Jean Hauser entered the door he found that Shi Mingwan's face was very pale. She didn't even dare to make a sound. After all, the soundproofing here was very bad. Next to him was Su Qingsang. She looked at Jean Hauser with panic, eagerness and embarrassment in her eyes. Even if the neighbor was her best friend, she didn't have the courage to let Su Qingsang know that she had become a mistress that she despised, but was ultimately a fact. Jean Hauser took a step forward and said softly, "Are you okay?" How could Shi Mingwan make a sound? She bit her lip and glared at Jean Hauser. The man in front of her had caused her to fall into such a situation. The resentment in her eyes was so obvious. Jean Hauser curled his lips and his gaze swept over Shi Mingwan. She had chosen a set of Uyghur clothing. The bright red color contrasted with her snow-white skin. Her appearance was very beautiful, but it wasn't the kind of beauty that could overwhelm others. She really did look like a Uyghur girl with this set of clothes. Jean Hauser narrowed his eyes slightly and took a step forward. Shi Mingwan instinctively took a step back. Behind her was the wall, so she had nowhere to retreat. Jean Hauser moved closer to her, tilted his head and kissed her lips. Shi Mingwan's eyes widened. She couldn't believe that he actually dared to do such a thing to her in the fitting room. She reached out to push him, but he bit her lips. His lips moved to the right, turned to her ear and bit her earlobe. Afraid of being heard? He spoke in a whisper so soft that only they could hear him. However, Shi Mingwan always had a sense of fear that someone would find out. She admitted defeat and looked at Jean Hauser, hoping that he would stop. "What do you think would happen if I took you right here?" His hot breath made her neck hot, but his words made her heart cold. She didn't even dare to make a sound. She could only stare at him with her eyes wide open as if he had gone crazy. Jean Hauser didn't look at her terrified expression. His big hand gently moved down the lines of her back and finally landed on her waist. "You look very beautiful in this outfit." He wasn't stingy with his own problems, but Shi Mingwan wasn't happy at all. She raised her hand to push Jean Hauser. Her hands were restrained by him and they were restrained behind her. "Are you afraid?" Shi Mingwan was about to cry. This man was a robber. That's enough. She didn't dare to make a sound. She could only speak silently, her eyes full of accusation. Jean Hauser saw the anxiety in her eyes. His hand moved down again and gently pressed on her waist, bringing her body into his arms. "If you don't want me to want you here, then beg me." Shameless. Shi Mingwan refused, but in the next second, Jean Hauser actually reached out to the hem of her clothes. "I beg you." Shi Mingwan sucked in a breath of cold air. She was really afraid of him, afraid that he was serious. She hadn't forgotten the sensational dressing incident last year. She definitely didn't want to become the female lead of such an incident. "Your begging really doesn't have any sincerity." Jean Hauser changed sides and kissed her neck. Like a vampire, he bit her neck lightly. After letting go, he bit her heavily again. A slight pain came from her neck. She didn't even dare to scream. She could only push him hard. He wasn't moved and she stubbornly resisted. In the end, he retreated and stroked the red mark with his fingertips. His gaze was deep. He whispered against her forehead. "If you listen to me tonight, I'll let you go. How about that?" Shi Mingwan pursed her lips into a straight line. What could she say at this time? What could she do? She couldn't resist. This man was a lunatic. She was really afraid that she would have a dressing incident. She could only nod. The moment she nodded lightly, she felt her eyes sting and swollen. A bitter feeling filled her heart. He didn't respect her at all. What did he take her for? Why could he treat her with such a bad attitude on such an occasion and in such a place? Jean Hauser looked at her red eyes and suddenly leaned over. He pressed her body against the wall and kissed her lips crazily. Shi Mingwan wanted to scream, but she couldn't. She didn't dare to. She looked at Jean Hauser. He was clearly her dear brother, so why could he treat her like this? She still remembered that her dear brother thought about her everything and protected her at all times. Why exactly did things turn out like this? She reached out her hand to push him. She was very afraid. She was afraid that he would really give her a dressing incident. She would definitely go crazy. However, she couldn't defeat him at all. He kissed her lips almost ferociously. Her lips were red and swollen from being ravaged. She couldn't escape. She couldn't help but tear up from the corner of her eyes. Jean Hauser's plundering action stopped for a moment. He looked at her watery eyes and her wronged expression made his heart tremble. His lips moved up and kissed away her tear. This kiss was much gentler than before. The kiss landed on her lips again. It was extremely lingering, tossing and turning. Shi Mingwan couldn't sink into it. She only felt nervous and afraid. Jean Hauser probably felt bored. He finally retreated and let her go. Shi Mingwan's legs went limp and she was about to fall to the ground. He easily hugged her and fixed her body. "Please." Shi Mingwan believed that he could understand her silent plea. She didn't want to do this, but the situation was stronger than her. Ever since she got entangled with Jean Hauser again, she discovered that he was domineering in his bones, as well as a ruthless and sinister side. Jean Hauser took a deep look at her, then raised his hand and carried her in his arms. "Jean?" Shi Mingwan only said one word before she stopped. She was extremely afraid. What exactly did he want to do? She lowered her voice. In order not to let others hear her, she had no choice but to move her lips close to his ear. She used a suppressed voice that she didn't dare to make a sound at all. "Jean Hauser, what are you trying to do?" If he dared to carry her out like this, she would definitely fight him to the death. She definitely would. "What are you nervous about?" Jean Hauser stared at her pale face and swept his gaze across her long dress. "Remember, you owe me again." As he spoke, he raised his leg and fixed her body slightly. Then, he pulled the clothes she had changed out of from the hook with one hand and covered her head with it. Shi Mingwan couldn't see outside anymore. Jean Hauser picked her up again, opened the door and walked out. As soon as he walked out, he met Hu Jinyao's gaze. Jean Hauser's footsteps paused for a moment. He was holding a person in his arms. The hand on Shi Mingwan's body pressed down on the corner of her shirt. This action was very subtle, but Hu Jinyao saw it. "President Jean, this is..." "Excuse me, President Hua. My girlfriend isn't feeling well. I'll take her back first. Do you need help?" Hua Jinyao looked very enthusiastic. My driver is right outside. If President Zhan needs it, I can ask him to take you to the hospital first. There's no need to trouble yourself. I drove here. Zhan Hao's voice was indifferent. As he spoke, he glanced outside the shop. Immediately, a bodyguard followed him in and paid the money. Zhan Hao only nodded slightly at Hua Jinyao and left with Shi Mengwan in his arms. From beginning to end, Shi Mengwan's upper body was covered by clothes. Not only could he not see her face, but even half of her body was covered. The only thing that could be clearly seen was the elegant red skirt. There were also those slender ankles. It could be seen that the woman Zhan Hao was carrying should be relatively thin. Zhan Hao walked to the door of the shop. From Hua Jinyao's direction, he could see that the woman's hands were tightly wrapped around Zhan Hao's neck. There was also the face that was buried in Zhan Hao's arms and covered by clothes. Not even her hair was exposed. The woman couldn't see anything, but Zhan Hao's actions of protecting the woman from the beginning to the end could be seen clearly. Hua Jinyao pursed his lips slightly. He didn't have much contact with Zhan Hao. They had worked together twice in Lin City before. They had also met a few times in Qing City. Whether it was the Zhan family in Tianyu or the Qin family in Lin City, they had all worked together. In his memory, he had met Zhan Hao several times. When he was with Chen Feifei, he had never seen Zhan Hao so careful with a woman. No matter who that woman was, to be able to make Zhan Hao so nervous, it really made him curious to see who exactly the other party was. Zhan Hao had already stepped out of the shop when Su Qingsang changed her clothes and came out. Coincidentally, the clothes she chose were the same type as what Shi Mengwan was wearing just now. However, Shi Mengwan was wearing red, while Su Qingsang was wearing yellow. As soon as she came out, she glanced at the door. From the corner of her eye, she only had time to see the red skirt disappear outside the door. He left. She had heard it from inside just now. When she saw Hua Jinyao's affirmative expression, she was a little gossipy. That woman left too? She was really sorry. She seemed to have heard some movement next door just now. She had no choice. This shop wasn't big to begin with and the soundproofing couldn't be very good. At the thought of Zhan Hao doing something embarrassing with that woman next door, her mood was a little complicated. Yes. How does she look? Is she prettier than Qin Feifei? She really didn't mean to be so gossipy. She purely wanted to find out and tell Shi Mengwan about the situation so that she would give up earlier. I didn't see her. Hua Jinyao didn't care about Zhan Hao. He also didn't care about what kind of woman Zhan Hao had. He looked at Su Qingsang with eyes full of admiration. Su Qingsang also realized that she was too gossipy. She shrugged and turned the page about Zhan Hao. Anyway, he already had other women and more than one. She believed that he and Shi Mengwan should be no different. She was shopping with Hua Jinyao today. She didn't want to be in a bad mood because of others. Do I look good? Su Qingsang turned in a circle in front of Hua Jinyao. The hem of her skirt fluttered in the wind. She didn't look like a woman who was 4 months pregnant at all. Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded. Su Qingsang looked at herself in the mirror and also felt that she looked quite good. I suddenly realized that I can wear this to take a set of photos next time. What do you think? Okay. Hua Jinyao unconditionally supported any decision Su Qingsang made. How about I help you collect all the clothes from 56 ethnic groups? Do you want to wear every set? Su Qingsang was amused by his words. Mr. Hua, do you want to spoil me? Yes. Hua Jinyao openly admitted. I just want to spoil you. This way you will never be able to escape from my hands. Enough. He wasn't afraid of being laughed at for saying such mushy words in this crowded shop. Knowing that she was shy, Hua Jinyao didn't say anything else. Su Qingsang changed out of the clothes, thought for a moment, and bought a total of 3 sets. Actually, what about this set of clothes? It's just for posing and taking a photo. It's too exaggerated to wear it out like this. Su Qingsang watched the shop assistant wrap up the clothes and say this when she brought them over. Then why did you buy so many? Yes, I bought them and sent them to Mengwan. She must like them. That was what Su Qingsang thought when she first saw it. As long as you're happy. Let's go. After buying the clothes, Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang left the shop. Someone naturally carried the things to the car behind them. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao continued shopping. It was a little cold at night. Su Qingsang rubbed her arms. Let's go back. Hua Jinyao looked at the time. Anyway, we'll be here for the next few days. You can come whenever you want. Okay. Su Qingsang yawned. She was really a little tired. Usually her physical strength wouldn't be so poor, but after all, she was pregnant. When she got home, Su Qingsang received a call from Li Qianxue. She knew that she was playing outside. Although she wouldn't say that she was messing around, she was still a little worried. Su Qingsang repeatedly explained that her current schedule was very easy, much easier than working in the hospital. Hearing this, Li Qianxue became nervous again. Is working in the hospital very tiring? Why don't you rest? You can go to work anytime anyway. Mom, stop fooling around. Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh and say, Mom, when you were pregnant, you continued to work as usual, right? You didn't say that you would stop working as soon as you were pregnant and do nothing, did you? Of course. Not only did I continue to work, but I also tried my best. I had to do my best. Her voice was very calm, but Su Qingsang immediately understood the meaning behind it. At that time, Li Qianxue was probably trying her best to prove herself to Su Qinghui, right? Mom. You and Mr. Wei, I have nothing to do with him. Don't worry about me. Take good care of the fetus and give birth to the child safely. Li Qianxue had no intention of getting married again, nor did she have any intention of provoking any man, especially a man like Wei Ting, who was so much younger than her and didn't look reliable at all. Got it, Ma. Before hanging up the phone, Su Qingsang still told Li Qianxue her thoughts. Mom, actually, I think even if it's not that Mr. Wei, there can be other men. You're still so young, you can totally start a new life. All right. Li Qianxue was defeated by her daughter. I told you not to worry about me. Why are you still talking about it? Just take good care of yourself and give birth to the child. That's the most important thing now. After hanging up the phone, Su Qingsang sent a video request to Shi Mengwan. In the end, the other party didn't accept. Su Qingsang later called Shi Mengwan, but no one picked up. After thinking about it, she sent her a message and told her that she had bought a few sets of ethnic clothes. Whether it was the color scheme or the style, they were all good. She had already sent them to her studio directly. However, after the message was sent, there was still no reply. This time she didn't even call her back. Su Qingsang's brows furrowed slightly. It can't be that something happened, right? What's wrong? Huo Jinyao came out of the bathroom and saw Su Qingsang holding her phone in a daze. He went forward and hugged her waist. Why didn't you rest after taking a shower? Why did you come to the balcony to feel the cold wind? No. I'm calling my mom. Su Qingsang thought of Shi Mengwan again. I don't know what Wanwan is busy with. She hasn't picked up my call. She hasn't replied to my message either. It's already so late. Maybe she's already asleep. Maybe. Although Shi Mengwan was a workaholic, she also took good care of her body. Other than when she had to rush, she still went to bed on time most of the time. Chapter 643. Although Shi Mengwan was lucky enough to escape today, she didn't let Su Qingsang see her with Zhan Haoze. But until she left the ancient city, she didn't feel at ease. She felt as if she was being roasted on a fire. Even when she got home, Shi Mengwan didn't recover from the shame she felt in the fitting room. This also directly led to the fact that when Zhan Haoze approached her, she refused to give him any face at all. All her tolerance and concession were based on the fact that she was convinced that the man in front of her was her dear brother. But if this dear brother was no longer the young man who protected her wholeheartedly and was no longer the dear brother in her heart, should she continue to persevere? Today's situation could be said to be an accident, but as long as she didn't break up with Zhan Haoze, it wouldn't change the fact that she was Zhan Haoze's secret lover. Especially when he had a fiancée by his side. She suddenly felt a pain on her shoulder. She realized that Zhan Haoze was biting her again. She didn't reach out. Her hands were tied by Zhan Haoze. Zhan Haoze. Ever since this guy came back, he said that she promised him that she would listen to him tonight. She was already very cooperative. Not only did she impulsively peel herself off like a newborn baby, she even took the initiative to wash herself clean and lie on the bed. She hated that he had tied her hands up for the sake of the so-called fun. She was like a fish on a chopping board, unable to move at all. Zhan Haoze looked at her angry face. When she was angry, she looked even more beautiful than usual. He couldn't help but think of the first time she was under him. She was clearly afraid and hesitant. But she was like a sacrifice. Her eyes were bright and beautiful. Her eyes were beautiful. Beautiful but not seductive, delicate but not seductive. However, it was precisely such a woman who gave people a very sexy feeling. Focus. He kissed the faint bite mark. Otherwise, I won't bite here next time. Pervert. Shi Mengwan couldn't help but speak. Zhan Haoze leaned over and bit the bite mark again, deepening the mark. Shi Mengwan was in pain and couldn't even scream. Her phone rang at this moment. She turned her face and saw Su Qingsang's smiling face on the flickering screen. At this moment, Zhang Haoze reached out and picked up her phone. Zhang Haoze put it down. Zhang Haoze looked at the video call request and shook his phone. Do you need me to connect it for you? Zhang Haoze. What did she look like now? How could he dare to let Su Qingsang see it? Zhang Haoze looked at her panicked face and raised the phone to the side. Staring at the resistance in Shi Mingwan's eyes, he leaned down again. Since you're afraid of letting others know, then do something to satisfy me. As he spoke, he untied her hands. When Shi Mingwan's hand regained its freedom, the first thing she did was to grab her phone. Unfortunately, before she could touch the phone, Zhang Haoze had already grabbed her hand. The phone screen darkened. Shi Mingwan bit her lip. Give me back my phone. He didn't give it to her. Instead, he tossed the phone to the side and pressed the mute button. He covered Shi Mingwan's body again. You said that you would listen to me tonight. This was something she had agreed to in the fitting room. Shi Mingwan didn't lose her memory, so of course she knew what he was talking about. Her lips were pursed into a straight line. She didn't move and Zhang Haoze wasn't in a hurry. He just propped his hands on both sides of her body and stared at her. In the end, Shi Mingwan was defeated. She gritted her teeth, raised her hand and put it around his shoulder. For Su Qingsang, the next few days in Qing City were very relaxing. Hua Jinyao had arranged everything. She only needed to bring him along to enjoy a comfortable trip. The two of them didn't stay in Qing City for long. A week. The two of them visited all the famous scenic spots in Qing City. After returning to Lin City, Su Qingsang went back to work after resting for a day. As usual, she brought a bunch of Qing City's specialties into the hospital. She was pregnant and married into a family like the Hua family. Even if she didn't work, no one would say anything. However, Su Qingsang still insisted on outpatient services every day and participated in surgeries, just like before she was pregnant. She was highly praised in the hospital for this. In fact, in a big environment like China, almost all doctors in first-tier cities didn't leave the front line for minor injuries. However, because Su Qingsang was Hua Jinyao's wife, people felt that it wasn't easy for her to do this. As Su Qingsang's belly grew bigger, it became more and more stable. The morning sickness was gone. There was still some nausea, but at least her appetite was good. During this period, Lu Tongjia often brought Auntie Zhou over to make soup for Su Qingsang or invited her back to the old mansion for dinner. Li Qianxue also flew to Rong City twice to see her. Every time she came, she brought big and small bags. As Su Qingsang's belly grew bigger and bigger, the things they bought began to be used for the baby. The two baby rooms that were specially cleaned up were already filled with things sent by the elders. Hua Jinyao almost didn't go out to socialize anymore. When he was free, he would go home. When he was free, he would accompany Su Qingsang for a walk and talk to the child in her stomach. Ever since Su Qingsang's last fetal movement, he especially liked to talk to the child in her stomach. Every time, he would introduce himself very solemnly, saying that he was the father so that the children would remember his voice. Su Qingsang didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she also felt very touched. More than 3 months had passed, and Su Qingsang had already been pregnant for 8 months. Because she had a month off this year, the new year was a little later than usual. When Su Qingsang was 8 months pregnant, her belly was already very big. Not to mention Hua Jinyao, even Sun Huiya told her not to go to work anymore. She had stopped doing surgeries a long time ago. Her belly was too big and there was no way for her to stand on the stage. She still accepted outpatient services, but as the month got older, Su Qingsang's belly became bigger than the average pregnant woman. Sun Huiya tried her best to arrange some easy work for her. Seeing that it was almost the spring festival, Hua Jinyao discussed with the elders of the Hua family and asked Su Qingsang to apply for leave directly. Su Qingsang didn't object. She picked a day and asked the driver to send her to the hospital to go through the leave procedures. Hua Jinyao was especially worried about her now, but she was very insistent, so he could only let her go. He only asked her to finish the procedures and go home quickly. Su Qingsang sometimes thought that Hua Jinyao was very funny. Where could she go with a big belly? She wasn't someone who would mess around with herself. She asked the driver to accompany her, finished the procedures and went home. From now on she would officially rest. Su Qingsang, who was on leave, was asked by old Master Hua to move back to the old mansion. Firstly, it was convenient to take care of her. Secondly, the place was bigger and the environment was better. It was more suitable for nurturing the fetus. Su Qingsang didn't refuse this time. Hua Jinyao had to work during the day. Although Auntie Yu was at home, she was pregnant with twins after all. The situation was different. If she had to give birth early, there would be more people at the old mansion. Su Qingsang thought that she wouldn't be used to it, but after moving here she realized that she wasn't uncomfortable. Every morning she would be very sleepy and often couldn't get up. When she moved here, no one would wake her up. After eating, she would read in the garden for a while. Although she didn't go to work, she still had to master the skills that she should master and learn. The winter in Rome City was very cold. If she wanted to go out for a walk, she had to wrap herself up like a ball. Lu Tongjia was very worried about her. Every time she wanted to go out for a walk, she had to accompany her. Later, she felt that it wasn't enough to follow her alone, so she brought Xiao Xia and Xiao Jiang to follow her. Su Qingsang wore a thick down jacket and walked on the path outside the Hua family's old mansion. Looking at Lu Tongjia holding her hand, she couldn't help but laugh. "Mom, I'm only 8 months pregnant. It's still too early to give birth. You don't have to be so nervous." "I'm not nervous." Although Lu Tongjia said that, she held her hand quite tightly. "Let me tell you, although this road is flat, you still have to be careful when you walk. If you ask me, you shouldn't take a walk. Just stay at home. Look at how cold it is." "Mom." Su Qingsang didn't object to her concern, but she said, "I'm a doctor. Walking properly will help with the delivery. And you know it's not good for pregnant women to stay at home all the time." "You're a doctor. If you say so." Lu Tongjia couldn't refute her words. With a daughter-in-law who was a doctor, she felt that her previous experience with pregnancy was completely useless. "But why did I hear that twins can't walk all the time?" "Mom, pregnant women's physiques are different, so the situation is naturally different. This needs to be treated differently. Don't be too nervous." "How can I not be nervous? You're not having one, you're having two." Lu Tongjia even emphasized her tone. Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh. "Mom, strictly speaking, it's actually easier to have two than one. After all, the fetus can't be as big as a single fetus." When she went for a prenatal checkup last time, Sun Huia also said that her children were all normal, but not particularly big. If possible, she suggested that it was better for her to give birth naturally. It was also good for her body's recovery. Su Qingsang understood these principles. If possible, she hoped that she could give birth naturally. If it wasn't allowed to go smoothly, she would let Sun Huia perform the surgery. As the spring festival approached, the atmosphere of the Hua family became more and more intense. Su Qingsang had nothing to do, so she stuck spring festival couplets and hung window flowers. Because Old Master Hua was around, these traditional customs were carried out every year in the Hua family. When she was putting up the couplets, Su Qingsang suddenly thought of Xiang Kaiping. Last New Year she was with Xiang Kaiping. At that time she already knew that she wasn't her mother, but she planned to treat her as her biological mother. However, she didn't expect those things to happen later. She knew that Li Qinshui wouldn't like her to visit Xiang Kaiping. Her belly was getting bigger and it wasn't convenient for her to go out. When Hua Jinyao returned home, she told him and asked someone to send something over to Xiang Kaiping. New Year's Eve. It was Su Qingsang's first time staying up with such a big family. This experience was also quite novel. Hua Jinyao had successfully taken control of Tianyu Group. Whether it was Hua Mingliang or Hua Mingmei, they worked in Tianyu Group and could get dividends, but Hua Jinyao's shares were almost overwhelming. Even if they were dissatisfied, they couldn't do anything about it. Therefore the big family looked quite lively, at least on the surface. On the first day of the new year, Su Qingsang, who was supposed to get up early, got up late. However, no one would wake her up at this time. When she went downstairs, she saw Li Qinshui, Su Yusin, and Old Master Li rushing over. Su Qingsang almost suspected that she was still asleep. "Grandpa? Mom? Yusin?" Su Qingsang was so happy to see Li Qinshui and the others. The last time Li Qinshui came to see her was more than a month ago. Now that she saw Su Qingsang, she felt that she had put on a little weight, and her belly seemed to be a little bigger. Yes, I came to see you. I wanted to come yesterday. But after all, there were some things to deal with at home, so we came over early this morning." "What? You don't welcome me?" Welcome. Su Yusin looked at Su Qingsang's belly. The two siblings often had video calls and often interacted. However, this was the first time he saw Su Qingsang's belly. "Are all pregnancies so scary?" "Yusin, what are you talking about?" Li Qinshui glared at her son. Su Yusin shrugged. "It's quite scary. I don't think anyone else's belly is so big. I'm a twin, so of course my belly is bigger." Su Qingsang looked at Su Yusin. The two of them hadn't seen each other for almost half a year. She felt that Su Yusin seemed to be a little taller and stronger. It seems that the university is indeed a plastic surgery hospital. Yusin seems to be more handsome. Of course. Su Yusin was quite arrogant, but after all he was in the Hua family, so he still restrained himself. Old Master Li, who had been silent, looked at Su Qingsang with obvious worry in his eyes. This belly is so big. Have you checked it? What did the doctor say? Grandpa. Every time Su Qingsang heard this, she was speechless. I'm a doctor myself. Don't worry, there's no problem. Really? Old Master Li looked at Li Qianxue. She had given birth to 2 children, but her belly didn't seem to be so big. Really? Su Qingsang had gotten used to the feeling of being doubted by the whole family in the past few months. But she still explained very seriously. Old Master Hua looked at the family and asked them to sit down. Su Qingsang looked at the Hua family sitting on the left, and then at the Li family sitting on the right. Suddenly she felt that life was perfect at this point. On the night of the first day of the new year, it unexpectedly snowed in Rong City. This was the first snow of the new year. When Su Qingsang got up in the morning, she looked at the silver outside the window and couldn't help but put on a down jacket and run out to see the snow. Hua Jinyao didn't have time to stop her. He quickly put on his coat and followed her. Qingsang, let me help you. It had been snowing all night and the snow was very thick. It was almost up to her calves. Su Qingsang didn't step out. She just stood in the corridor. There was no snow under the eaves, and the road leading outside had been cleaned by Uncle Cheng and his men early this morning. But she could see the thick snow on both sides. Didn't you see it when you came to Rong City? Why do you still look like a country bumpkin who hasn't seen the world? Yes, I'm a country bumpkin. I just like to see it snow. Su Qingsang made a face at him. Hua Jinyao couldn't help but laugh. Su Qingsang had improved since she was pregnant, but she was becoming more and more like a little girl in front of him. I want to go build a snowman. Su Qingsang was about to walk into the garden as she spoke. Hua Jinyao didn't dare to let her do it. I'll help you build it. Just stay here. But I want to do it myself. Don't be willful. You don't want the child to freeze, do you? I'm wearing so much. After Su Qingsang said that, she also knew that she was being willful. Okay, then I'll watch you build it, okay? Okay. Hua Jinyao was satisfied with this. He walked towards the garden. There was a lot of snow on both sides. Let's build a panda. Su Qingsang suddenly had an idea. For too big and too small, okay? Hua Jinyao looked at her helplessly and went to do it. Su Qingsang watched him build the shape of the first snowman and couldn't help but step forward. Don't move. Just stand under the corridor. This road is very slippery last night. My shoes are non-slip. Su Qingsang took 2 more steps forward. At this time, Li Qianxue had already gotten up and came out. She didn't find her daughter in the room, but she saw Su Qingsang outside in the cold wind through the window. She was so nervous that she ran out. Qingsang, what are you doing? Mom? Su Qingsang heard Li Qianxue's voice and turned around. This action was very normal, but Su Qingsang forgot that she was pregnant. She turned around too quickly and she lost her balance. Hua Jinyao, who was about to fall into the snow, was scared out of his wits when he saw this scene. He quickly rushed over and caught Su Qingsang's body. Be careful. As Hua Jinyao spoke, he helped Su Qingsang stand steadily. Li Qianxue also walked over. How old are you? Why are you still so immature? If you want to see the snow and make a snowman, just stay inside and watch. I got it, Mom. Su Qingsang begged for mercy and wanted Li Qianxue to stop talking, but Li Qianxue felt that it wasn't enough. You know your current state. Stop looking at the snow. Come, let's go in. After saying this, she glared at Hua Jinyao and said, You too. She's messing around and you're messing around too? Hua Jinyao knew that he was in the wrong, so he quickly helped Su Qingsang inside. Su Qingsang stuck out her tongue and looked at Li Qianxue's back guiltily. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang helplessly, signaling her not to go against Li Qianxue at this time. He helped Su Qingsang into the house. When they went up the steps of the corridor, he thought that Su Qingsang could stand steadily, but Su Qingsang suddenly put her entire body weight on Hua Jinyao. Qingsang? Su Qingsang's hand was on her abdomen. Her expression was a little pale. Li Qianxue, who was in front, had already turned around and saw that her expression was not right. Qingsang? Are you okay? Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang shook her head and tried her best to maintain her composure. I might be giving birth. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.